The wonderful adventures of the Warhammer elf. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, Living Saint. Looking at Rohan, who was completely under her control, Isabel's face was expressionless. At this moment, she was like a fishmonger who had slaughtered fish in Artie Mart for 10 years, and her heart was as cold as the knife in her hand. More than half a year ago, after she learned how to communicate with plants, she wanted to know what kind of people Rohan and his elves were. However, what she knew was a series of tragedies about elves and humans. A rather outrageous setting, because plants cannot move. Each plant is a gossip spirit. They will communicate with each other about what they see and hear, and life magicians can obtain information by chatting with plants. This made her feel deeply deceived. Were the sweet words she said at the beginning just a deception for the occasion? Exclamation mark. Didn't we agree to travel to the end of the world together? Why did she have to be deceived even about these things? Exclamation mark. Green magic slowly emerged from Isabel's hands, and the thorny vines wrapped around Rohan suddenly loosened, throwing Rohan to the ground. Tell me how you can explain your deception, Law, my love. Ahem. Should I thank you for this opportunity, Lisa? After landing, Rohan suddenly pulled out a silver-plated dagger from his waist, staring at Isabel with some anger. For you, I would not hesitate to let the elves bleed to launch a war against the kingdom of Gus. For you, I prayed to the Lady of the Mist and gave you the opportunity to learn magic. And now, you suspect that I deceived you? Is this your decision? To use force against me? Facing the anger in Rohan's eyes, Isabel slowly closed her eyes, her heart full of bitterness. Maybe she shouldn't have been given this opportunity? Puff. The sound of the dagger piercing the flesh was heard. Isabel opened her eyes in confusion, and then was shocked to see that Rohan had inserted the dagger into her chest. Do you remember? I swore to you that I would never let anyone hurt you, not even myself. Seeing the astonishment on Isabel's face, Rohan's mouth curled up into a gentle smile. He knew that it was time to test his acting skills and alchemy. Letting his blood slowly flow from his chest, Rohan slowly walked to Isabel, looked at her somewhat dull eyes and smiled softly. I don't deny that I once concealed something from you, because I was afraid that you would be prejudiced against me after knowing the actions of my fellow tribesmen. But now, I will use my actions to prove how real my love for you is. Holding Isabel's hand on the handle of the knife inserted in his chest, Rohan kissed Isabel's cheek while firmly stabbing the handle of the knife down. It hurts so much. Even if he mentioned taking a lot of painkillers and rebirth pills, the pain of cutting his chest and ribs with his own hand still made Rohan's whole body tremble uncontrollably. What are you doing? Stop it. Seeing Rohan holding her hand and breaking his chest bit by bit, Isabel hurriedly wanted to pull out her hand to heal him, but Rohan held her hand tightly and said gently, you doubt my heart, I know, so I will give you my heart to show you my sincerity. I don't need this. It's enough. Stop it. Woo woo woo. Seeing Rohan gradually kneeling on the ground, Isabel also knelt down, crying and shouting for Rohan to stop. She was not proficient in life magic at this time, and she completely ignored the risk of magic overload. Green light continued to emerge from her hands, trying to heal Rohan's wounds. She hated Rohan, but she simply hated him for hiding something from her, and she didn't want him to die. But how could Rohan watch his wounds heal? He had already paid so much for this self-torture. Even if it was not true love, it had to become true love. Rohan, who was already immersed in the play, grabbed Isabel's hand that was about to cast a spell, kissed her lightly on the lips affectionately, and then opened his chest to reveal his beating heart. Bright red blood gushed out of Rohan's body, forming a large puddle on the ground. Rohan looked at the system panel nervously, in case his blood volume dropped to the critical value. If he didn't have a few rebirth pills in his mouth, he wouldn't be so crazy. Do you see my beating heart? Lisa, I'm willing to give you everything I have. What about you? Why do you think I will betray you? Rohan lay weakly in a pool of blood. He reached out to touch Isabel's face, narrowed his eyes slightly, and showed a warm smile. He gently pulled Isabel's hand to his heart. Looking at Isabel, who had fallen into a daze, Rohan decisively swallowed the last few rebirth pills in his mouth. slowly closed his eyes and murmured, "See. As long as it is still beating, my love for you will never change. What stupid things have I done? Law. Don't leave me." Isabel woke up after touching Rohan's gradually stopping heart. She frantically overloaded the healing and regeneration she had just learned, trying to plug the big hole in Rohan's chest. However, Rohan's life seemed to stop at this moment. Although Isabel successfully repaired Rohan's body, his soul seemed to have left his body. No matter how hard she tried, there was no response. No. Looking at Rohan, who had completely lost his life, Isabel hugged Rohan's corpse in pain and prayed to Lady Mist. "Dear Lady Mist, please save my love. My stupidity killed him." Rajlia! The clone who stayed in this world immediately came to the bedroom, looked at Rohan's corpse on the ground, and asked Isabel in surprise, "Tell me, what happened?" After a while, 6. After listening to the conflict between the couple, Rajlia looked at Rohan lying in a pool of blood and couldn't help but exclaimed, "You are really amazing. For such a trivial matter, are you willing to sacrifice your life?" "Please, ma'am." "Hey, just this time, never again." After all, as a believer, Shangal, Rohan still pleases her very much. It just so happens that Rohan had helped her preach before, and she hasn't rewarded him yet, so this time she might as well bless him directly. A holy light shone on Rohan's body, and the pale skin that had been due to excessive blood loss instantly regained its rosy color, and a faint light emerged from Rohan's body. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining. PS. I'd better do less of this kind of work in the future. It feels a little watery. Chapter 77. Clearing the court. Stop cursing. Stop cursing. I learned this fragment from the next door. It seems that no one likes it very much. Cack. Ding, congratulations to the host for finding true love. Gained the characteristic, love like blood. Ding, congratulations to the host for receiving the blessing. Gained the characteristic, living saint. What happened? Rohan, who was hiding in the system space and waiting to wake up, heard a series of prompts in his ears. He was a little confused about the faint holy light on his body and didn't understand what happened. How could he be canonized after pretending to be dead for a while? How could he know that his self-torture trick not only successfully deceived Isabel, but even Ms. Mist thought he had died for love? As consciousness gradually returned, Rohan opened his eyes and looked up to see Isabel's big tearful eyes. Seeing that Rohan finally woke up in her arms, Isabel hugged Rohan excitedly and cried, "Rohan, it's all my fault. I shouldn't. It doesn't matter, I'm still alive." After gently touching Isabel's hair, Rohan stood up and looked at the faint white light around him. It seemed that he really got the blessing of the goddess. Then Rohan knelt on one knee and saluted to the Rajlia clone who was watching the show in the air. "Dear lady, thank you for waking me up. Maybe you don't need me to save you." Rajlia's face under the veil revealed a hint of weirdness. Rohan woke up too quickly, making her feel that her blessing didn't seem to come in handy. Could it be that this bastard deliberately deceived her blessing? While Rohan was comforting Isabel in his arms, he looked at the two new attributes that appeared on the system, his heart filled with ecstasy. "Bad love like blood, scumbag. You actually deceived a pure girl's true love." When any woman fights side by side with the host, the woman's all attributes increase by 20%. Living saint, you, who have been blessed by the Lady of the Mist, are already extraordinary. Obtain, full of physical strength special protection plus 20%. This, what is? Rohan's hands trembled slightly while holding Isabel, and he felt that he had endless strength all over his body. Is this full of physical strength? I didn't expect that it was just a self-torture trick, but I actually got so many benefits. It seems that I should sell my misery in front of the Lady of the Mist more in the future. He thinking of this, Rohan couldn't help but reveal the queen's smile on his face. Realizing that something was wrong, Rajlia turned away angrily and continued to collect the faith of this world, cursing as she flew. "I was fooled. This bad boy. You know, it takes divine power to send down blessings." Although she has gained a lot of faith power in this world, she still feels a little unhappy. After carrying Isabel in his arms to the bed, Rohan took off his clothes and smiled at Isabel with red cheeks. Do you want to help me check if there are any wounds on my body? Okay. Extras omitted here. The palace is still in turmoil, but outside the palace, it has exploded. In just 1 year, the Silver Mist Guard quickly replaced the position of the Royal Knights, and the provocation that Elmont suffered today made the already cold relationship between the two worse. In the palace, countless human servants were armed under the orders of their knight masters. As low-level cannon fodder, they didn't know why they were ordered to bring weapons and go to the palace together, but they still subconsciously obeyed the order. At some point, the front hall of the palace had been blocked by dozens of knights, and the central points on the walls had also been blocked by longbowmen, forbidding anyone to enter or leave. Some noble ladies didn't know what was going on, and some ran to the knights angrily to question them. However, when they saw more and more soldiers pouring into the castle, they realized that something was wrong. This was an attempt to seize power. Lock them all up. After locking all the crying women in the room, Elmont raised his shield and sword and shouted to the nearly 1,000 attendants and knights who had already come. Knights, those damn pointed ears have blinded Her Majesty the Queen. Those elves demolished the church, destroyed the cross, and even expelled the noble royal knights from the palace. Most of the attendants were at a loss after hearing Elmont's speech, and only some clever soldiers changed their faces and guessed what was going on. Sure enough, Elmont's next shout confirmed their guess. Gentlemen, warriors of Cloister, the palace is now full of rebellious ministers, and the royal knights cannot watch those damned elves control Her Majesty the Queen. The royal knights must shoulder the burden and wipe out all those pointed ears who are slandering Her Majesty the Queen. For Her Majesty, march to the palace. The servants were silent, but the fanatical knights waved their weapons and rushed into the palace while shouting for the Queen. Looking at the knights who kept rushing into the palace in response to him, Elmont's face showed a smile. He had written a letter to the military headquarters of the City Defense Army in advance. The commander-in-chief there was his brother for many years. He believed that the support of the City Defense Army would arrive soon. However, at this time, in front of the Elves Station, the commander-in-chief of the Lion Lake City Defense Army was kneeling in front of Dario, holding an envelope with both hands and crying, "My lord, the rebellious soldiers are planning to besiege the palace. I risked my life to escape from the hands of the rebellious knight leader Elmont, and delivered this news. Is that really the case?" Dario raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at the 4,000 Durachi warriors who had already assembled behind him, and the 5 1K who were gnawing on human legs in their heads, took out a purse from his arms and smiled. "Listen, I want you to play a game with me. As long as your acting is good enough, I will forgive your crime and give you some rewards. In the palace, hold the line of defense. Don't let these bastards disturb the good things of the adults." In the hall, the Silver Mist Guards relied on the terrain advantage to continuously kill the rebels who tried to enter the palace and firmly guarded the city gate. Some soldiers loyal to Isabel in the inner castle also chose to help the elves and fight against the knights who tried to break into the palace. However, due to the large number of rebels, although the elves tried their best to kill hundreds of knights and a large number of retainers, there were still hundreds of rebels participating in the battle. Elmont looked at the gradually retreating elven army with satisfaction. What invincibility! He was fighting these invincible elves. Moreover, more and more good news came, which made his self-confidence swell rapidly. "Sir, the City Defense Army came to support. At least nearly 1,000 people came. Good. You are worthy of being my good brother, so loyal." Watching these city defense troops holding spears entering the hall, Elmont shouted to the knights who were also excited, "Stop the attack. I want to talk to the people inside. P.S. Damn, I have to write papers these days, and there are sheep in my family's office. Now my life or death depends on these few days, so I can only update once for the time being." CAC. Chapter 78 Suppression. As the rebels besieging the inner castle gradually retreated, Elmont held up a white flag and led the City Defense Army to the gate, shouting to the soldiers on the city wall, "Fellow countrymen inside, surrender. Our goal should be to face the outside world together and kill all the elves." "Elmont, you traitor. Do you know what you are doing?" On the city wall, the captain of the longbow guard looked angrily at the arrogant Elmont below. The confident expression on the other's face made him feel sick. Compared with the royal knights who were simply loyal to the royal family, these longbow guards swore allegiance to the queen herself, so Elmont's behavior was rebellion to them. Hearing the captain's rebuke, Elmont sneered and pointed at the dozens of knights who followed behind him, as well as the numerous city defense troops around him, and sneered, "Of course I know what I'm doing. That is to eliminate those pointy-eared bastards around Her Majesty the Queen. They have threatened Her Majesty's rule over the kingdom, so they must be eliminated." Then, Elmont threw down the white flag in his hand and shouted to the commander-in-chief of the city defense army standing in a safe area, "All out attack." The city defense troops raised their spears and pointed their spears at the already desperate longbow guards and expressionless silver mist guards on the city wall. Because the rebellion happened too suddenly, they did not prepare too many arrows, and the armory was occupied when the rebellion broke out. The fierce battle had already exhausted the ammunition they carried with them. The rebels looked at the city defense troops standing behind them and felt confident for a while. With such reliable teammates protecting their backs and knights in command, it was impossible to lose, no matter how you think about it. Elmont looked at the commander-in-chief of the city defense army hiding behind the shield, his eyes full of disdain. It was incredible that such a coward could get the position of commander-in-chief. It must be because the elves bewitched Her Majesty the Queen that such a foolish and incompetent person was able to take the position. In this case, let the war decide the outcome. All troops attack. Attack. At the order of the commander-in-chief, the city defense soldiers waved their spears and stabbed those defenseless rebellious knights and their servants. The rebels never expected to be betrayed by their teammates. For a time, hundreds of rebels were stabbed in the chest in this backstab. How is it possible? Elmont was also stabbed in the thigh by a city defense soldier. He had to kneel on the ground and watched in horror as the royal knights around him and the city defense soldiers got into a melee. But he didn't have the chance to be shocked for too long. After a warhammer hit his helmet, he collapsed on the ground powerlessly and merged with the bodies of the surrounding royal knights. And the queen, whom he had been thinking about so much, was having fun in the bedroom with the elf leader whom he hated the most. No one cared about their death. The next day, the palace, which was originally full of corpses and blood, was cleaned up. Only the faint smell of blood in the air told of the tragic massacre that had taken place here. Isabel, dressed in gorgeous clothes, sat on the throne. She first smiled at Rohan who was standing beside her, and then looked coldly at the rebel leader, who was escorted up by several silver mist guards. The visitors were Elmont and some rebellious knights of the royal knights. Be honest. The silver mist guard kicked Elmont on his severely injured thigh. He immediately fell to the ground in pain, and then slowly raised his head, his face full of decadence and paleness. Looking at Isabel on the throne with gorgeous makeup, Elmont climbed forward tremblingly and tried to explain, "Your Majesty, for the sake of my taking care of you for many years, please. Law, how do you think I should deal with this guy? I think it would be more convenient to just use the gallows." Isabel ignored him. She didn't have any good feelings for this idiot who almost disturbed her and Rohan's good time. When the two were happy in the room last night, they heard the fighting outside. If Rohan hadn't held her tightly and refused to let her leave, she would have rushed out and used Forest Awakening to let these rebels taste the wrath of nature. After hearing Isabel's verdict on him, Elmont was disheartened. Although his rebellion was somewhat selfish, he did hope that the queen would wake up. Seeing Isabel seeking the advice of the elf messenger, Elmont advised in despair, "Your Majesty, you don't need to seek the opinions of outsiders. You are the monarch of the kingdom of Cloist. There is no need. I think we only need to hang the leading rebellious knights. After all, the great expedition is imminent, and we should not waste the troops we can get." In front of Elmont and the knights of the kingdom, Rohan walked to the throne, bent down and kissed Isabel's red cheeks and said, "In order to spread the faith of Lady of the Mist, we should gather all the forces we can mobilize. Even if they are rebels, they have their uses, don't they?" Seeing this scene, the nobles and palace ministers who did not participate in the rebellion pretended not to see it. After all, they also knew that they had no right to interfere in such matters. Elmont was angry and wanted to rush up and beat this shameless man who defiled Her Majesty the Queen, but he was held by the silver mist guards and could not move. Helplessly, Elmont turned his sight to his former colleague nearby and advised earnestly, "We can't let the kingdom fall into a meaningless battle. Humans should not shed blood and sacrifice for the elves. Do you want to watch this continent become the territory of the elves? Hearing Elmond's cry, Rohan walked down the steps, came to the other side, patted his shoulder and said, "You don't have to worry about this, Lord Knight. I promise you that under the leadership of Isabel, this continent will become more prosperous than ever. Take all these rebellious knights away, and hang them tomorrow, those surrendered soldiers, as long as they are willing to continue to be loyal to their queen, can join the Great Crusade and wash away the shame with the blood of the enemy." The verdict was quickly passed down to the entire kingdom. No matter whether it was the princes and nobles or the common people, they were all surprised by the betrayal of the royal knights. But soon, this matter was overshadowed by another big news, that is, the Great Crusade. In order to spread the faith of the Lady of the Mist, Her Majesty the Queen issued a holy order. Every knight is obliged to participate in the Great Crusade. When you kill a rebellious pagan on the battlefield, your soul will be sublimated. All warriors who unfortunately died in the Great Crusade will have the opportunity to go to the temple built by the Lady of the Mist. For a time, the entire Albion continent was in a boiling state. P.S. Both my parents have passed away, and I feel that I'm almost there too. If I don't update one day, I hope everyone will understand and be considerate. CAC. Chapter 79. Rest for a few days. My head hurts so much, and I feel my joints are sore when I raise my hand. Everyone must remember to wear a mask and always have alcohol spray on hand. CAC. I really don't have the energy to type anymore. I slept for 16 hours, woke up, ate, and went back to bed. The most important thing is that I haven't taken a shower for almost 3 days. When I have more strength, I will double my effort to code again, but please forgive me now, I really have no strength at all. Everyone must protect yourselves. Chapter 80, Another World. In just 1 month, knights from all over Albion began to march towards Lion Lake City, ready to join this great expedition. Although there are 2 pagan countries that believe in God in addition to the kingdom of Christ, in order to bless their souls, the knights who believe in God are also ready to join this expedition. After all, God is not always there, and Lady of the Mist is a goddess who has truly come and blessed the believers. In front of the temple outside Lion Lake City, thousands of knights from all over the continent are kneeling on one knee on the ground, looking at the girl floating in the air with fanaticism. The girl is covered with a layer of white gauze all over her body, and a faint mist shrouds her graceful figure. From time to time, she sticks the holy water in the bottle with willow branches, and throws it to the knights below. The knights who were thrown by the holy water felt that their physical strength increased greatly, and they seemed to have endless power all over their bodies. Having tasted the sweetness of the first colonization of the other world, Rajulia increased her investment in the expedition to the other world of Rohan, and blessed these mortal knights generously. Although these blessings are time limited, they can also allow these knights to reach the level of Bretonnian chivalrous knights in a short period of time. Inside the castle, Rohan, wearing a linen robe, looked at Rajulia, who was pretending to be a charlatan in the square, and said to Dario beside him, "During this period, you will be responsible for reorganizing the human army. I will go to the next world to scout in person to avoid errors. My lord, this kind of thing can be left to Ange or others. Wouldn't it be too risky for you to go to the next world in person?" Dario hesitated. After all, this kind of reconnaissance mission is still too dangerous. No one knows what is in the other world, let alone going there alone. After hanging the Shangfang sword in his cloak, Rohan covered his pointed ears with a black robe. Seeing Dario's worried look, he comforted him. "Don't worry, I have mastered the use of the portal during this period. Even if I can't beat it, won't I run away?" Unlike the previous unfamiliarity, Rohan can now freely control the size and position of the portal, and can even continue to cross the world to replenish people. Therefore, as long as he is not subdued instantly, Rohan will be sure to save his life. Remember, if I open a small portal, quickly retreat with the army. If I open a large portal, it means that I can launch a full-scale attack, understand? After giving Dario a final warning, Rohan put on a human skin mask, and a purple dimensional crack opened instantly, and Rohan's figure disappeared in the portal. A few days later, somewhere in the new world, be honest. You damn pointy ears. Dozens of human warriors wearing black and red plate armor are driving 2 prisoner carts. Several elves in them are tortured to death, which makes people feel very sad. They are the Ebony Gauntlet Knights from Cliffrock Bay. This time they came to the Black Forest to hunt these Nolder elves and then bring them back to Cliffrock Bay for public execution. Although the Nolder elves' accurate rain of arrows often caused them heavy losses, the Ebony Knights were always able to rely on their powerful siege crossbows and maces to forcibly break through the Nolder elves' defenses. Suddenly, the leading knight slowly stopped, his scarred face under the raven helmet full of vigilance, staring at a black-robed man approaching not far away. As a noble knight of the Ebony Gauntlet Knights, he, like his comrades, is a racist who is willing to fight for humanity. And this mysterious man dared to walk alone in the Black Forest full of elf debris. For them, he is likely to be an enemy. After taking out the siege crossbow from his back, the Ebony Knight quickly aimed the crossbow at the black-robed man, waving to his companions and shouting in a dull voice, "You! Stop! Take off your hood." After hearing the knight's question, the surrounding ebony servants raised their warhammers and aimed at the man of unknown origin. After all, this is already the periphery of the Black Forest. Except for the slave hunting team like them who capture the Nolder elves and the poachers of the Red Brotherhood, few people come to this forest. And they just defeated a patrol of Nolder elves not long ago. Who knows if this guy is here for revenge? The black-robed man stood there, and under the vigilant gaze of the knights, he slowly took off his hood, revealing a handsome human face. The person who came was Rohan, who had changed into a human skin mask, and this was the 4th day that he had been lost in this forest. During this time, Rohan had been wandering in the forest, looking for useful information, until he met this team not long ago. Seeing that these Ebony Gauntlet Knights seemed to have great hostility towards him, Rohan raised his hands and pretended to panic and shouted, "Don't be nervous, gentlemen, I'm a merchant from Emperor's Port. Because the team was attacked by the Nolder elves, now I can only wander in the forest alone. Another caravan attacked by pointed ears. Can't you take a detour?" "No way. Although it is a bit dangerous to venture through the forest, at least you don't have to pay tariffs to the Solian territory." Who knew that we would run into them this time? It's really unlucky. This information was not picked up by Rohan casually. After all, there are indeed many caravan wreckages that were attacked in the forest, and Rohan also looted some maps and diaries from them. Seeing that Rohan really seemed to be a lost merchant, the Ebony Knights slowly let down their guard. One of them considerately brought Rohan a piece of dried meat and bread, patted him on the shoulder and said comfortingly, "Don't worry, my compatriots, as long as people are alive, everything can start over again." Rohan took the food and ate it with relish. While sighing that it was surprisingly delicious, he continued to ask the knights, "Thank you, respected knight. May I ask who you are?" "We are the Knights of the Ebony Gauntlet. Maybe you haven't heard of us, but you just need to remember that we are a group of knights fighting for humanity." "I see. You are really admirable warriors. I wonder where you are going next. Can you give me a ride?" After all, Rohan had never heard of this world before, and the only living creatures he had come into contact with were these human warriors, so he was ready to get some information from them. "P.S. My fever is close to 40 degrees. I'm still alive thanks to the blessing of the Emperor Kak." Chapter 81, Ebony Gauntlet Knights. "You want to go with us? Are you sure?" After hearing Rohan's request, the leading knight hesitated a little. It was not because the team was short of food, but because he was worried about Rohan's safety. After all, according to common sense, the Nolder elves should send pursuers to rescue the captives they captured, and there will be the Red Brotherhood coveting these elven captives along the way. It can be said that the journey is difficult. Although they are not afraid of those hateful pointy ears and those earners that come for the smell of money, they cannot guarantee the safety of this compatriot. "This is for your own good, my compatriot." Seeing that Rohan seemed determined to follow them, the Raven Helmet Knight put away the siege crossbow, suddenly pulled out a mace from his waist, rushed to Rohan's back, aimed at the opponent's head and smashed it down. Although the knight's movement seemed a bit clumsy to Rohan, he did not dare to be careless. After dropping the bread, he immediately drew out the Imperial Sword and prepared to parry the opponent's attack. Bang! A sound of hammering reached everyone's ears. The Ebony Knights looked at Rohan in surprise as he used his long sword to block the mace. They obviously didn't expect that the knight's attack would be blocked. The knight was also full of surprise. Although he didn't use his full strength in the previous hammer, it was difficult for even ordinary people to resist. If the human knights were just simply surprised, then Rohan's heart had already set off an uproar. What kind of Emperor's chosen one is this? He can actually force me to use 10% of my strength? You have to know that he is now a living saint who has received the blessing. 10% of his strength is enough to rival those mortal giant swordsmen of the Sigma Empire. And this guy's physical fitness is far superior to that of humans in the old world of Warhammer. Is he some kind of chosen one from another world? Exclamation mark. Then, when Rohan had the opportunity to parry, he was able to take a good look at the sturdy knight in front of him with a physique of nearly 2 meters. The black plate armor was decorated with red gauntlet emblems. The blood-stained spikes on the hammerhead and the amazingly powerful patches on the back all showed that this was a powerful human warrior. No wonder they have the courage to hunt those so-called Nolder elves. This power is really good. If the quality of humans in this world is so good, then Rohan can completely replace all the vassal troops. Thinking of this, Rohan hurriedly supported the sword with his hands, and his arms kept shaking, pretending to be exhausted. He asked with horror, gritting his teeth, "Sir Knight, why are you doing this?" Looking at this young man who could take 60% of his strength, the Raven Helmet Knight retracted his mace with satisfaction and temporarily let go of his guard against this young man. Seeing that Rohan still seemed to be on guard, the knight took off his raven helmet and explained without apology, "Relax, young man. After all, the forest is full of pointy ears and Red Brotherhood scum. I don't want to be distracted in the battle to save you. If you can't even withstand my attack, you might as well die in my hands as soon as possible. At least I can give you a quick death without suffering too much torture. Your kindness makes me cry." Seeing that these humans did not recognize his identity, Rohan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After all, the intelligence has not been fully collected yet, and he is really worried that he will start off badly. In this way, with the welcome of human warriors and the hateful eyes of elf captives, Rohan successfully mixed into this slave hunting team. 1 week later, the periphery of the forest. "You bastards, can't you recognize that this is the team of the Ebony Gauntlet Knights? Get out of here." The Raven Helmet Knight looked at the red cavalry who were constantly wandering around the convoy not far away, and pointed the crossbow at the leading man while scolding. The other knights also raised their siege crossbows, and formed a circle with the surrounding ebony servants, protecting Rohan, who was not wearing armor, and the carriage in the middle. Rohan looked at the cavalrymen in the distance with curiosity. The red mail and one-handed crossbow should be the Red Brotherhood mentioned in the diary, right? After these days of communication, Rohan has learned a lot about this continent through these ebony knights, and it also made him understand where this world is. It is Pence prophecy. As a senior Mountain Blade player in his previous life, Rohan is not unfamiliar with this land called Pend. Although the era is too long, it does not affect Rohan's memory of some magical items and treasures on this continent. For example, the Dragon Tear Gem, with unknown functions, the Albus Elixir, that can strengthen the body, and the Twilight Dust, that strengthens the spirit. And this world is also full of crises. Unlike the god who disappeared in the previous, Giant Catcher, world, this world really has gods, unknown wealth and adventure, and the first time facing a potentially hostile god. I'm so high that I can't stop. Rohan's body, covered by a black robe, trembled slightly. At this moment, he wanted to draw out his imperial sword immediately, rush up to fight, and vent his excitement. An ebony hammerman holding a long-handled steel hammer saw Rohan trembling, and thought he was afraid, so he encouraged him in a low voice, "Relax, brother, our captain is the best knight commander of the Ebony Gauntlet Knights. These robbers who can only steal chickens and dogs are not our opponents." Not far away, the leading member of the Red Brotherhood naturally knew this. He looked at the nearly 100 red cavalrymen around him and slowly retreated. Originally, they just came to see if they could pick up a loophole. If they could get an elf prisoner, it would be even better. But now it seems that there are at least a dozen ebony knights and their attendants in this team. Such a team is obviously not something they can take. After all, they usually bully caravans with weak defenses. If they really have to fight against these foot knights who are famous for their archery skills in Pender, I'm afraid that half of his men will flee before the fight starts. Having said that, the leader of the Brotherhood still asked unwillingly, Respected knight, you have several captives of the older elves. As long as you are willing to give me one, I will immediately make way and ensure that you will not be harassed by the Red Brotherhood on the rest of your journey. Ha 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 ha, get out. The Raven Helmet Knight sneered and pulled the trigger directly at the leader of the Red Brotherhood. The leader immediately lowered his head in fear, and then he saw that the leather hat on his head had been pierced by the crossbow and fell to the ground. Damn it, give me. Before the leader finished his harsh words, another arrow flew over, but this time the arrow hit the leader's throat directly. P.S. It's great, my family and roommates are all happy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82. Times have changed. Who shot the arrow? The Raven Helmet Knight looked at his companions angrily, but all he got were blank faces. The Red Brotherhood's cavalrymen were in chaos. Seeing their leader being shot and falling, they thought it was the Ebony Knights who shot the arrows, so they prepared to fight back. However, before the two sides officially started fighting, a loud horn sounded from the woods. Woo, the pointy-eared bastards are coming. Get ready to meet the enemy. Turn around and aim at the forest. The unique horn sound quickly made the Ebony Knights react. Now is not the time to be distracted and deal with the bandits. Benolder is the biggest enemy. Rohan was once again protected in the middle of the team, so he simply sat on the prisoner car and looked curiously at the swift cavalry rushing out of the forest. The silver-white plate armor shone with a faint white light under the sun, and the peculiarly shaped composite bow was easily pulled out of the full moon, turning into a meteor and shooting at the unsuspecting Red Brotherhood. Retreat. Retreat. The Brotherhood, originally composed of bandits and highwaymen, was no match for the older elves. They were shot by accurate arrows and fell off their horses screaming. Those Brotherhood members who tried to escape would be caught up by the beige elf horses that were as swift as the wind. The sharp swords would easily pierce their mail and pierce their hearts. Good skills, but unfortunately they are still a little worse than my boys. Rohan, sitting on the prison cart, chewed bread in his mouth. He was not worried about the threat of the older elves at all, and even had time to criticize them. Inside the prisoner carriage, an older girl covered in wounds heard Rohan's comments and could not help but curse in a somewhat stiff human language. Dirty human brat, stop your derogation immediately, otherwise my people will let you see the cruelty of the elves to humans. Wow, I'm so scared. What is an old woman saying here? Looking at the hostile elf girl, Rohan knew that the other party's age was probably comparable to his own, so he directly teased her. Sure enough, hearing that Rohan, a short-lived creature, dared to call her an old woman, the elf girl was so angry that she wanted to break the cage and rush out directly, but in the end she could only helplessly say, "Pathetic human, I will give you a chance to save yourself. As long as you open the cage now, I promise." Okay, that's enough. Can't you learn to be quiet from your companions? After throwing a small piece of dried meat across the cage onto the girl's messy golden hair, Rohan flexibly dodged the arrow shot at him and then jumped off the carriage. Now his special protection has reached an astonishing 55%. It is still very simple to dodge the arrows of the older elves. Pulling out a longbow from the cargo carriage, Rohan weighed the feel of it and shook his head with some disdain. The craftsmanship of this bow is not as good as the old farmer's bow in Britannia. Looking at these elf riders who are constantly wandering in the distance, Rohan has no feelings of kinship with them, so he just bends the bow and puts an arrow on it, aiming at one person and shooting directly. Whoosh, some forked inferior tail feathers tear the air, and the arrow shoots straight to the throat of an elf knight. The powerful blow directly penetrated the throat of an older knight. The severely injured body struggled to cover the wound on the neck, but eventually fell off the horse powerlessly. This is a human arrow? Seeing the arrow stuck in the neck of his comrade, another older knight passing by was very surprised. Such excellent archery skills are comparable to the archery masters of the older. While dodging the crossbow arrows from the Ebony Knight, he used his peripheral vision to look for archers among the humans. Soon, the older knight found Rohan, who looked like a newbie, in the center of the crowd. Rohan was fiddling with other longbows on the carriage like a novice. These were all spoils of war that the Ebony Gauntlet Knights had seized from the robbers. The elven girl in the prisoner's carriage naturally witnessed Rohan's miraculous arrow. Seeing that Rohan was choosing weapons on the battlefield like a fool, she continued to taunt him. Don't be so proud. You are just lucky. It won't be long before you and your stinking human compatriots will. You are annoying. Beige underwear auntie. The elven girl's curse came to his ears again, which made Rohan very unhappy. So he poked the other person with his bow through the cage and bent his bow again to aim at an older knight. Swoosh, another arrow was shot out. The older knight, who had been prepared for a long time, immediately put up his shield. However, before he could be happy, the elven horse under his crotch let out a wail. The arrow shot directly into the horse's eye socket. The severe pain did not make the elven horse fall, but continued to run with the other eye. Seeing that the war horse under the opponent's crotch could still run after being so severely injured, Rohan's inner collector's habit moved instantly, licked his lips and said, "Yo, this thing is good. When I have time in the future, I will raise a few of them in the horse farm to play with." Looking at the rough bow and arrow stuck in the eye socket of his beloved horse, the face of an older knight under the helmet was as cold as ice. This was a warhorse brought from his hometown. How could it be insulted like this? Exclamation mark. As the two sides had already started fighting, Rohan and the prisoner car lost the protection of the Ebony Knight, and the hammermen were busy dealing with an older infantry in the bushes and could not provide cover. After finding the right opportunity, the older knight rushed directly into the crowd and rushed towards Rohan in front of the prison cart with the heavy blow of the ebony warhammer. Looking at the unarmed Rohan, the older knight sneered and taunted, "I will enjoy your struggle before death, stupid human." Rohan did not hear the taunting of the older knight. He only saw him pick up a boar spear with his toes and then threw it at the elf horse. Ululu, the short spear directly pierced into the other eye socket of the elf horse, and the force was so great that it even shattered the horse's head. The older knight on horseback fell to the ground. Because Rohan wanted to pull off the plate armor on the other side, he did not use a bow and arrow to make up for the knife. Instead, he drew out the imperial sword and waited for the other side to get up like a gentleman. Ahem, damn human. The dusty older knight got up from the ground angrily. Seeing that Rohan actually wanted to have a fair duel with him, he couldn't help but grinned. "Boy, you will regret it." After that, he threw down his shield, grasped an older sword with both hands, and rushed straight towards Rohan. Rohan looked at the older knight who was getting closer and closer with an expressionless face, and then he took out a pistol from his black robe and pointed it at his head under the older knight's puzzled eyes. "Take people, eat shit. PS, I feel like I should be able to make it through. I'll resume updating twice a day after a few days to confirm that I'm no longer feverish cack." Chapter 83. 82 Years of Wine. The older knight passed away peacefully. The lead bullets penetrated his snow white helmet directly, and a bunch of red and white things came out of the hole in the back. Looking at the older knight lying on the ground, Rohan turned his pistol like a western cowboy, looked at the terrified elf girl in the prison car, and sneered, "Is this the brave knight of your older? If it's just this level, then I'm relieved." The sudden gunshots made the noisy fighting on the battlefield stagnate. The ebony knights looked at the musket in Rohan's hand, which was still emitting wisps of green smoke, and an older knight lying on the ground in shock. After a moment of silence, an ebony knight looked at the dead older knight and was the first to congratulate Rohan, shouting to him, "Well done, young man. You killed an older knight, which is something that many knights can't do." As soon as these words came out, the surrounding ebony hammermen cast envious and respectful eyes at Rohan. Although Rohan used external force, being able to kill an older knight alone is already a victory that mortals can brag about for a lifetime. However, Rohan ignored these praises. He had left the forest now, and did not need the help of these humans. At the same time, the intelligence had been collected, and he could leave. The battle did not stop because of the death of an older knight. More and more members of the Red Brotherhood died under the rain of older arrows. Countless horses ran wantonly on the battlefield because they lost their masters. Their speed and strength were not as good as the older elf horses, but Rohan did not have much choice now. Amid the curses of the elven girl, Rohan unloaded the bow and weapons of the older knight and equipped them all on his body. Looking at the older composite bow inlaid with blue gems in his hand, Rohan nodded with satisfaction. This feel was just right for him. Then he put on the elven quiver and began to look for a useful horse. After careful observation, Rohan slowly left the crowd, followed by a quick run, turned into a shadow, and pounced on an ownerless white horse. Fuck, go. Ignore. Rohan found the right opportunity, turned over and jumped onto the horse's back, then patted the horse's butt hard, took out the compound bow, and looked at the elves around him. Obviously, these older elves did not react as quickly as his young men. After shooting 2 older knights off their horses with 2 consecutive arrows, Rohan patted his butt and prepared to leave. Huff. Rohan whipped the horses, but with a whip, and the white horse ran away in pain, carrying Rohan towards a village in the distance. The older knights were naturally ready to chase after them, but they were stopped by an elf knight wearing sky blue plate armor. The Twilight Knight shouted, "Don't chase them. So many of our compatriots were killed by a mortal. Haven't you learned your lesson yet? Rescue the imprisoned compatriots first." Hearing this, the older knights gave up chasing Rohan, and turned their arrows to the ebony gauntlet knights who could not leave. There is a big account to be settled between them. Bacchus Empire, Imperial Harbor. The tall stone wall made of yellowish rocks came into view. Hundreds of legionnaires in Roman-style armor were guarding the city walls and gates to prevent the snake worshippers from sneaking into the crowd. Rohan was walking on the avenue with Onion. At this time, he put all his weapons under his black robe, so from a distance he looked like a ranger with 2 swords. At this time, he was just like a bumpkin, looking at the rare ancient Roman-style buildings around with interest, and couldn't help but sigh. This is like a medieval building. Giant Catcher is a fairy tale world after all. How can the architectural aesthetics be as beautiful as this ancient Roman style? Compared with the fairy tale like Giant Catcher, Lion Lake City, the architectural style of Imperial Harbor is relatively soft. The sound of blacksmiths forging iron and dogs barking from time to time give life to this city. On the way, he could see a statue of the goddess named Damia Profidi. Her naked upper body and the wreath on her body made Rohan fantasize. I heard that Lilith on the staff of Tigris is also topless. I wonder if Teddy will touch her when he is bored. Finally, Rohan led the horse he named Onion to the door of a tavern, tied it in the stable, and pushed the door into the room. Come on. Keep drinking. Why do you Imperial people like this juice squeezed from rotten grapes? It's disgusting. Boss, another beer. Oh my god, you are a freak from the Cold Crow realm. How can fermented wheat water be better than sweet wine? All kinds of quarrels and shouts were heard incessantly, but all this did not make Rohan feel bored. Instead, he felt a sense of relief. Having lived in the treacherous Tarachi society for more than 100 years, Rohan almost forgot how nostalgic this unique human smell of fireworks was. Maybe I shouldn't have been a dreadlord back then. It doesn't seem so bad to be an elven mercenary leisurely. The comfortable atmosphere made Rohan's mind a little lax. He casually found a seat in front of the bar and sat down. He took out a gold coin and threw it to the boss, saying, "Give me some food and a glass of the best wine in your store. Let me taste how strong the imperial wine is." Handsome boy, I can't pretend I didn't hear such big talk. The owner of the tavern was a middle-aged woman with frizzy hair. She picked up the exquisite gold coin on the table that she had never seen before, and after seeing Rohan's young face under his hood, she smiled and said, "I have good wine that is not available in the entire Bacchus Empire. As long as you can afford the price, I will prepare a bottle of 82-year-old wine from the Empire for you." 82-year-old wine from the Empire? I thought all of that had been completely drunk up. Before Rohan could speak, the drunkard next to him came up to make a fuss, and put his arm on Rohan's shoulder, as if he was familiar with him, and said dissatisfiedly, "Madam Boss, you never told me that you had such good wine here." "Nonsense. People like you can just drink wine mixed with water. Can you afford this good wine?" The proprietress choked the drunkard in the face, and then brought a carefully packaged wine bottle to Rohan. She was not worried about buying on credit for such a generous and mysterious customer. Rohan was indeed not short of money. Without asking the price of the bottle of wine, he directly reached out to take the bottle and unplugged the tightly corked bottle cap. Pop. A unique aroma of wine that had been accumulated for many years immediately wafted out, and the originally noisy pub immediately became quiet. P.S. Without taste and smell, I feel that life is meaningless. Cack. Chapter 84 Isidillon. This wine is good, but I've had better ones. Looking at the purple red wine in the glass, Rohan shook the glass gracefully and commented with some regret. There is no shortage of fine wine in the society of Dorichi. After all, compared with the short lifespan of humans, the elves have plenty of time to wait for a bottle of truly good wine that has been sealed for hundreds of years. After hearing Rohan's evaluation, the proprietress was slightly surprised. She did not doubt that Rohan was bragging, so she was even more surprised. So she asked curiously, then, if there is a chance, do you mind letting me see what a truly good bar is? Don't worry, you will have this opportunity soon. Rohan glanced at the proprietress. When the city was taken over by him, he would consider transforming this tavern into a store specializing in selling elven fine wine. However, Rohan's disdain for the fine wine of the empire naturally aroused the hostility of many imperial people. Several drunks sat in the corner, looking at the purse that Rohan handed to the proprietress with greedy eyes. From the surprised look in the proprietress's eyes, it was not difficult to guess that this guy had a lot of money. The excuses for robbery were all ready. They would make Rohan apologize for the reputation of the empire's fine wine. If this guy knew what was good for him, they would only take some money at most. But if this guy dared to resist, they would knock him out and sell him to the Red Brotherhood. I believe that many rich ladies would like such a pretty boy. Thank you for the hospitality. There will be some minor fights in the city in a while. After you stick this on the door, no one will bother you. After eating some steak and noodles to satisfy his craving, Rohan left the purse and a silver cross symbolizing the Lady of the Mist under the puzzled eyes of the proprietress. Then Rohan took his equipment and left the tavern. Seeing this, several drunks immediately stood up and followed him with axes and daggers. Rohan had already noticed these drunks in his peripheral vision. After a simple count of the number of people, he slightly raised his mouth and walked into a remote alley on the street. He had always wanted to study the magical physique of humans in this world. If all humans in this world could become stronger through training like that knight, they would be the perfect tool to fight against chaos. Turning his head to look at the tools who were following him, Rohan's mouth corners gradually rose, slowly pulled out the older long sword from his waist, and said with a smile, "Come on, test subjects, let me see where the limit of you humans is." At this time, everyone including Rohan did not notice that at the end of the alley, a green figure was quietly following them. The mysterious figure followed everyone all the way and slowly came to the deepest part of the alley. Here, 4 drunks raised their weapons and shouted curiously to Rohan, who was wearing a hood, "Boy, you led us to this alley. Are you confident that you can get rid of a few of us? I'm surprised that you are not as arrogant as the villains in those stories, but very cautious." Why? Rohan was indeed a little surprised. According to the traditional story routine, shouldn't he say a few harsh words to himself and then easily take on 4 people and come to a slap in the face of Long Ocean? How come even the gangsters have become so wise now? The leading drunk obviously saw Rohan's doubts as an outsider, so he patiently answered, "Is this your first time in Pender? The city of Pender is full of Red Brotherhood spies. For the sustainable development of the city, the Brotherhood has expressly prohibited robbery." No way. Robbers still care about the development of the city? What robbers? The supporters of the Red Brotherhood have won several seats in the Senate. Now they are serious city managers. Speak with respect. After listening to the drunk's somewhat proud introduction, Rohan realized how corrupt the city he was about to attack was. This is no longer an ordinary corrupt human empire, and a heavy blow must be taken. Purification. A city with such serious bureaucracy must be thoroughly purified and let the followers of Lady Mist take over. Thinking of this, Rohan stopped talking nonsense. After the experiment here is over, he will summon the army and directly capture the city. Let me see if you are growing normally. A few hours later, I feel relieved. Rohan slowly put down the sword in his hand, looking at the 4 corpses on the ground with satisfaction, and muttered like Frankenstein, "The physical strength is 1.5 times that of a well-fed Bretonnian farmer, and the growth potential is comparable to that of an elf. He is simply a martial arts genius that is rare in a century." When he thought that such excellent data would appear on a human, Rohan couldn't help rubbing his hands, and his face was full of impatience. As long as he can deceive, guide these humans to believe in the Lady of the Mist, He will have a large number of superhuman servants in the future, and it will be just around the corner to attack the Chaos Demon realm and capture Slaanesh alive. Thinking of this, Rohan couldn't help but excitedly pointed the sword in his hand to an empty corner nearby and shouted sternly, "Don't show off your tricks in front of an expert. Just get out of here." A man wearing a green Nolder helmet and a cloaked Nolder ranger armor walked out of the shadows, looking at the miserable scene on the ground around him and Rohan's pointed ears that were no longer concealed. He couldn't help swallowing and explained, "Sir, I mean no harm. I just want to see if you need help." "Yes, you really mean no harm. Otherwise you wouldn't be alive until now. Ranger of the Nolder, tell me why you're here." Rohan looked carefully at the Nolder elf who suddenly appeared. Was he here to hunt down his ranger? Seeing the undisguised murderous intent on Rohan's body, the strange elf hurriedly raised his hands and explained, "Sir, my name is Lysadilon. I was expelled because I accidentally killed one of Lord Mithrandir's favorite nephews in a duel. Now I'm looking for a job. So why did you come to me? Do you think I would lack a servant responsible for duels?" After hearing the other party's identity, Rohan couldn't help but mock him. He thought he was expelled for some reason, but it turned out to be because of this. Mithrandir, if Rohan remembered correctly, should be a lord of the Nolder elves. It is said that he was a very righteous and kind lord. I didn't expect that he would even let his relatives and enemies go. Hearing Rohan's ridicule, Lysadilon's face was a little ugly. He couldn't help but draw his sword and refute. "I don't know your identity, but sir, you must apologize for what you said and did just now. P.S. Damn, my head is still so dizzy. By the way, how many of you are lucky enough not to have had the new crown? Come out and let everyone see the rare creatures." Chapter 85. War begins. Young elf, I don't think you know what you are going to face yet. Rohan looked at Lysadilon with amusement as he drew his sword. He was not going to play anymore. The army had been waiting for too long. It was time to have a big fight. Lysadilon didn't know Rohan's background. Seeing that Rohan looked down on him, he was ready to rush forward angrily. Unexpectedly, Rohan threw a money bag at him. Looking at the money bag in the air, Lysadilon thought it was a trick and slashed it directly in the air. However, the golden coins in the sky made him a little confused. Looking at Lysadilon, who was drowned in the gold coins and at a loss, Rohan elegantly put away his sword, walked past Lysadilon, and walked to the exit of the alley. Before leaving, Rohan looked back at this somewhat reckless but interesting elf boy, and after thinking for a moment, he said, "Do you want to see what the real world looks like? Do you want to have countless wealth and glory? If you want, come with me. I just need someone." After saying that, he turned around and left. He believed that his words would be very attractive to an elf who was alone outside. In the alley, Lysadilon looked at the gold coins scattered on the ground in confusion, and then immediately reacted. After picking up the gold coins on the ground with the reaction speed of the elves, he rushed out of the alley to find Rohan. There was no one on the empty street. Lysadilon looked at the footprints on the ground that were a little indifferent but still fresh, and the corners of his mouth under the helmet rose slightly. Is this to test him? Okay, then let you see the skills of the youngest assassin master of the Nolder. Imperial Port, Central Square. The streets were crowded with people, and people held flower baskets and fruits to congratulate each other in the square. With the blessing of the goddess, Damia, the Bacchus Empire once again ushered in the harvest season. The mountains of wheat and fruit trees full of huge fruits in the nearby farms made people feel happy. In order to commemorate the favor of the goddess, people are holding a grand ceremony. People knock on the doors of their neighbors from house to house and offer their most sincere blessings. Rohan stood on the top of a house, looking at the crowd below expressionlessly, counting the number of enemies. He could see that the legionnaires of the Bacchus Empire were drinking fine wine, and the crossbowmen did not carry bulky crossbow machines. Except for the outer city walls, the entire city was in an undefended state. According to statistics, the first wave of offensive after the portal was opened needs to eliminate at least 2,000 legionnaires wandering in the city, which requires ensuring that the first round of offensive is swift enough. After opening a small portal, Rohan threw his written battle plan to the other side of the portal, and Ario would get his battle plan on the opposite side. Just as Rohan was about to start executing the plan, a green figure suddenly climbed onto the roof. It was Lysadaran who was tracking Rohan. I found you, so can I join the gang now? Who is your assassination target? Lysadaran looked at Rohan curiously as he was observing the military camp with a telescope. At this time, he didn't know about the invasion plan of the other world and thought that Rohan was an assassin serving the nobles. After all, most of the expelled Noldor elves would choose to provide help to human nobles in exchange for commissions, and Rohan looked sneaky and obviously didn't look like a good person. Rohan put down the telescope, and the crowd celebrating below was reflected in his blue pupils. He turned to Lysadaran and smiled. I have a task for you. There may be some small turmoil in the city later. I hope you can take advantage of the turmoil to assassinate the officers of those legions. What? This job doesn't sound like a serious assassination. Are you a member of the snake cult? Lysadaran looked at Rohan in astonishment as he was taking off his robe, revealing a light leather armor underneath. This kind of job was obviously not something that an ordinary elf would take. Did he run into a den of thieves this time? Is it too late to break up now? However, the purse that Rohan threw over again made him react quickly. He caught the purse and smiled after feeling the weight of the gold coins inside. Don't worry, sir. As long as I see the sign of turmoil, no officer will leave the barracks alive. Hearing this, Rohan nodded with satisfaction. Although such behavior was completely icing on the cake, it could still test the reliability of the new officer. As a cautious Tarachi, Rohan would not put all his eggs in one basket, so he would prepare for both situations in the next period of time. Half an hour later, Rohan rode Carrot to a forest several kilometers away from the Lingang and directly opened a portal. As it was already afternoon, under the setting sun, thousands of knights and their servants were walking quickly through the portal and gathering in the woods. They were the 30,000 Albion warriors who had received orders in advance and had been waiting on the other side of the portal. Dario and his musketeers also passed through the portal. After seeing Rohan, Dario saluted and replied, "My lord, I have divided the army into two groups according to your instructions. These armies are the weakest civilian armies. The Knight Army and the Durachi warriors will come when the portal is opened next time. Well done, Adjutant. Do you see the city in the distance? You are responsible for leading these soldiers to attack. Wait for me to send a signal before taking action. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lord." In Rohan's plan, this army will be used to contain the frontal troops of this city, and the elite troops composed of human knights and Durachi will be directly teleported into the Imperial port by Rohan. Under Rohan's plan, unless all the humans in this world are superhuman warriors like the Ebony Gauntlet Knights, they will not be able to resist Rohan's double-sided trap. After arranging with Dario, Rohan once again rode back to the Imperial port. When the summoning ended this time, the war officially began. Since Rohan did not hide his elf appearance at all this time, he rode on a carrot and broke into the gate of Dlingang and came to the central square under the disgusted eyes of the citizens. Look at that. There is an elf swaggering in the Empire. Is this a bad omen? It's disgusting. I heard that the Great Plague 100 years ago was related to these pointy-eared people. I don't know why the Empire didn't issue an extermination order to kill them all. Countless rumors kept attacking Rohan, but all he got was Rohan's contemptuous smile. It seems that these guys don't know that they are about to die. A hooligan who didn't know how to live or die came forward and wanted to provoke him, but before he could say anything, Rohan drew his sword and split the hooligan in half. The originally noisy square suddenly became quiet. No one expected Rohan to suddenly kill people. It was not until a few seconds later that a scream came. The elf is killing people. Hearing this, the people in the square immediately reacted and fled around frantically. Several human soldiers in the crowd raised their weapons and grinned as they tried to take down the daring elf lunatic, but soon they stopped laughing. "Come out, my army." Boom boom, purple lightning tore through space out of thin air, and huge cracks continued to devour the surrounding space. The two different worlds officially connected at this moment. A terrifying figure slowly crawled out of the dimensional crack, with 5 ferocious heads shaking constantly, and scarlet pupils staring at the terrified crowd around, making waves of excited roars. Chapter 86, Atonement Camp. The roar of the war hydra resounded through the sky, and almost all the humans in the city noticed this huge monster that suddenly appeared in the city and fled in panic. Rohan stroked Warnke's cold scales, and the 5 big heads instantly came to Rohan obediently, licking Rohan affectionately with their purple tongues. HMM. It smells so good, however, as a war hydra that has been carefully cared for by the shit shoveling owner for more than half a year. Warnke is now considered a civilized beast. The dirty thing that has not been bathed in the woods for several days should still eat less. After simply greeting Warnke, Rohan pointed to the infantry of the Bacchus Legion who were gathering not far away and shouted, "Warnke, today's extra meal, fire breathing." After Rohan's teaching for half a year, Warnke can already understand most of Rohan's commands. So the 5 heads opened their bloody mouths one after another, and orange-yellow flames gushed out of the 5 big mouths. The fierce pillar of fire immediately engulfed the crowd without any resistance. Countless citizens and the legionnaires who were mixed in were instantly engulfed by the flames. They disappeared in the sea of fire before they even had time to resist. Run away. Go outside the city. There's a monster. Where are the legionnaires? Damn, this monster must be related to the snake cult. The rioting crowd ran towards the city gate. The turmoil soon attracted the attention of the officers in the barracks. They quickly put on their armor and took their weapons to command the soldiers. An officer killed several thugs who took advantage of the chaos with a broadsword, and then shouted to the soldiers who were gathering, "Soldiers, hold on, eh?" However, before he finished speaking, a sharp arrow fell from the sky and pierced the officer's throat directly. Looking at the legionnaires who were once again in chaos below, Rhyssadillan on the roof silently hid again, shooting the officers who tried to maintain order with a bow and arrow from time to time. Looking at the war hydra that was wreaking havoc in the city not far away, Rhyssadillan once again shot the officer below with an arrow, and then couldn't help but sigh. This is really an unforgettable signal. I really don't know what the purpose of such a crazy move is. After all, Warnke looked like a big snake with 4 limbs and 5 heads, so Rhyssadillan also regarded Rohan as an evil wizard of the snake cult. Although Rhyssadillan didn't know whether Rohan was a member of the snake cult, Rohan gave too much after all. As an assassin with professional ethics, he would still complete the task. At this time, the city was already in chaos. The corrosive flames of the war hydra almost caught the dark sky at dusk. Warnke looked like a monster from the Ultraman theater next door in the sunset. In the chaos, some members of the Red Brotherhood began to take advantage of the fire. They kept smashing stores and robbing the luxury goods that they could not afford before, with joy on their faces. However, soon, they found that something seemed wrong. "Why are there so many colleagues here?" Exclamation mark. Human warriors in strange armor and some elf troops they had never seen before kept emerging from the purple portal. These guys killed anyone they saw and robbed any good things they saw. They were much more efficient than these timid little thieves. Some imperial officers who had not figured out the situation were about to step forward to question the origins of these human troops, but then they turned into corpses on the ground, announcing to the surrounding citizens that these guys were enemies, not friends. It was not until now that the bewildered citizens realized that this was clearly a premeditated invasion of the elves. Escape. Escape to the outside of the city. The citizens screamed and tried to flee the city, but it was not until they arrived at the city gate that they realized that the situation here was more serious than inside the city. On the top of the hill, Dario was constantly observing the collapsed city wall with a telescope, and he shouted to the cannon gunner next to him with a smile, "Keep firing. Blow down their city wall for me." Boom boom boom. 4 cannons purchased from the Sigma Empire kept spraying out fire snakes, and thunderous cannon sounds reached the ears of the defenders, all of which made them extremely panic. Since most officers died tragically in the city under the assassination of Rhyssadillan, there were not enough officers on the city wall to conduct unified command. The brave and fearless Legion soldiers on the battlefield in the past could only fight on their own, watching the city wall being blasted open in despair. Seeing this, Dario nodded with satisfaction, and then said to a bald officer behind him who was wearing simple chainmail and holding a sword in both hands, "Traitors, now it's time for you to make merit. Go." The officer's face, which was originally a little dull, finally responded. His eyes stayed on Dario's face for a moment, and then he came to a group of soldiers dressed the same as him with a big sword without looking back. The officer was Elmont, and the nearly 1,000 giant swordsmen who had their hair shaved and were wearing chainmail behind him were the atonement camp. Because Rohan adhered to the principle of not wasting, these soldiers were promised that, as long as they could kill the enemy on the battlefield of the alien world, their treason would not affect their families. This made the soldiers who had lost hope in life regain their confidence. Although they were only wearing the simplest armor and weapons at this time, it did not affect the fanaticism in their eyes when they looked at the people of the Bacchus Empire. As long as they could chop off the head of an alien, they could wash away their sins, and their families could return to normal life. Elmont, who came to the front of the army, had no time to speak, and the soldiers who had heard Dario's order could not wait to wave their giant swords and rush towards the collapsed city wall. The remaining defenders on the city wall naturally noticed that a group of lunatics who didn't even have shields were rushing towards them waving giant swords. Quick! Bring up everything that can be shot, and give priority to shooting these crazy people without shields. Without having to obey orders, the soldiers of the Legion subconsciously pulled the trigger and fired a rain of arrows. Countless crossbow arrows fell into the crowd, and nearly 100 soldiers of the Redemption camp were instantly shot to the ground. However, the soldiers who were determined to die did not care. They stared at the revelations of these Legion soldiers and gasped. Because they did not hesitate to spend their physical strength, the Redemption camp soon arrived in front of the city wall. When Elmont was about to swing his sword to chop at the Legion soldiers in the tortoise shell formation in front of him, a figure suddenly knocked him away. "Don't fight with me. This head is mine." Sharp javelins were thrown from the army of the Bacchus Empire. The broad-headed javelins instantly cut off their arms and flesh, but they didn't care. At this time, in their eyes, there was only the blood and heads of aliens. P.S. The first day resumed double updates. It is really easy to go from simple to luxurious, but it is difficult to go from luxurious to simple cack. Chapter 87. The Snake Cult joins. Charge. Dedicate the alien's head to the lady. The soldiers of the Redemption camp kept attacking the tortoise shell formation blocking the city gate. Although their physique and strength were not as good as those of the pent people, their inner madness was enough to make up for it. The giant swords in their hands kept slashing at the large shields of the legionnaires. After feeling the power from the shields, many legionnaires couldn't help but feel confused and excited. "Soldiers, these humans are not strong. We can." For the lady. Just as a surviving legionnaire was about to lead the defenders to counterattack, he suddenly saw a soldier of the Redemption camp with strange smoke all over his body, ignoring the sharp blades around him, and rushed into the city wall with crazy shouts. In the horrified eyes of the officer, the soldier of the Redemption camp ignored the dozens of spears inserted in his body, and used up his last strength to fly into the shield wall. Boom. A small mushroom cloud exploded from the tortoise shell formation, and the strong flames instantly engulfed the surrounding legionnaires. Even some soldiers of the Redemption camp who were unable to dodge were affected, and overturned to the ground by the air wave. Dario, standing on the hill, observed all this through a telescope. The cruel smile on his lips showed that he was quite satisfied with the performance of the Redemption camp. These human bombs mixed in the crowd were arranged by him. "Don't stop the bombardment. We don't want to occupy, but to destroy. Blast down all these city walls." At this time, the walls of Dillingang had already become riddled with holes. The soldiers of the Bacchus Legion tried to use shield walls to resist those crazy soldiers of the Redemption camp, but the human bombs mixed in the crowd made them defenseless. These soldiers of the Redemption camp who served as human bombs were all strong prisoners carefully selected by Dario. Most of them hoped to leave a sum of money for their families before they died, and Dario gave them this opportunity. Looking at those crazy self-destructing soldiers, Dario's face was not guilty at all, but quite satisfied. Anyway, they were all human prisoners. It was their blessing to be able to let them contribute to the careers of Druki and Lady Misty before they died. They should thank me for giving them this opportunity. Compared to Rohan, who still had a trace of mercy in his heart, Dario's fighting style was even less concerned about the lives of the vassal army. Instead, he kept urging the Atonement camp to continue the attack. Let the reserve team prepare. After the Atonement camp takes down the city wall, the whole army will attack. He was not worried about the casualties of his own Atonement camp. After all, Rohan handed over tens of thousands of weak human vassal troops to him this time, in order to contain the main force of the Bacchus Empire. With this madness, the Atonement Camp, which was completely inferior in quality and quantity, actually succeeded in suppressing the Legion soldiers and successfully killed its way into the city wall. Looking at the unarmed and terrified citizens hiding behind the city wall, the soldiers of the Atonement Camp were slightly stunned, and then shouted excitedly, "It's aliens. Kill them all. Dedicate their heads to the lady. Dedicate your heart and lungs to the lady." In order to strengthen the combat effectiveness of the Atonement Camp, Dario specially arranged for his men to mix a little poison into the food of these soldiers. This poison is not fatal, but it will make them irritable and angry. At the same time, they cannot feel physical pain, which will only paralyze their nerves. But the soldiers of the Atonement Camp obviously don't know this. They think that this is a blessing of the Lady of the Mist that makes them fearless, so they join the battle more frantically. The citizens who finally escaped to the city gate looked at the soldiers of the Atonement Camp pouring into the city in despair. The giant swords in their hands kept slashing like fans, slaughtering the citizens who could not resist. "Help. We are surrounded." The screams of the citizens also attracted the Legion soldiers who were fighting in the streets in the city, causing them to have to divide their forces to deal with the Atonement Camp who were slaughtering. In less than half an hour, the whole city fell into a sudden disaster. The officers could not command the army, and the nobles all huddled in the castle. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. Rohan stood on the head of the statue of the goddess Damia, not caring about his blasphemous behavior at all, but looking at the unresponsive castle with a telescope with interest. Previous intelligence investigations let him know that there is a knight group called Shadow Legion in this city. If these knights are really as strong as those knights of the Ebony Gauntlet Knights, it will be the biggest variable in this battle, and it is not something that those mortal knights can resist. The reason why he let Wanke destroy the city was to lure out this knight group, to prevent these knights from hiding in the castle, and then rely on the terrain for defense. The knights with chivalry should not watch the tragedy in the city and do nothing, right? Looking at the castle that was still motionless, Rohan couldn't help scratching the back of his head. Did these knights really intend to watch them die without helping? No way. At least they should send a small force to support them. Why is there no movement at all? Rohan, who was observing with a telescope at this time, didn't know that they were not the only ones who were destroying the city. Inside the castle, hundreds of knights in black plate armor were gathering. The leading knight was a gray-haired old man. He was holding the hilt of his sword, staring at the green armored soldiers around him. Although he was old, his strong muscles and sharp imperial broadsword that could not be hidden by his armor made the surrounding green armored soldiers dare not step forward. Looking at the familiar green plate armor on the friendly castle steward in the past, the old knight sighed and couldn't help asking, has the power of the snake cult developed so rapidly? Xavius, what benefits did the evil goddess promise you to make you betray the empire? Benefits? Don't use your dirty values to belittle my beliefs. Steward Xavius wore green plate armor and held a weird shaped scimitar in his hand. His pupils glowed with green light and kept looking at the shadow centurions surrounded by the snake cult warriors. Looking at the hostility written all over the knights' faces, Xavius actually tried to persuade them. Why do we have to go to war, Centurion Hathaway? In this world, destined to be hopeless, only the merciful goddess Astahika can save the world. Join us? I don't want to believe in a female evil god who stinks of snakes. I heard that your goddess likes to extract the essence of her believers. How about letting a few priestesses seduce me? I want to show you what it means to be still sharp. Looking at the snake cult warriors who surrounded him and the centurions, although Hathaway appeared calm on the surface, he was full of anxiety in his heart. Unprecedented riots are breaking out in the city, but the centurions trapped here don't know what is going on. Is it some conspiracy of the snake cult? P.S. Do you want to publish a collection of pictures of Penda? I feel that not many book friends have read Penda Kak. Chapter 88 Loyalty. Rohan was unaware of the chaos in the castle. He was sitting on the chest of the statue, shooting the Bacchus Empire soldiers with his bow and arrows. Rohan did not feel much, or for the gods, that really existed in this world. Instead, he looked forward to whether he could help Lady Mist devour their power. After all, Rohan is now a living saint. He is now half a chosen one, so he is naturally not afraid of the gods of this small world. The battle lasted until night, and the large forces of the Imperial Legion were wiped out. However, to Rohan's surprise, the casualties of the human servant army far exceeded the previous estimate. In the central square, Rohan looked at Dario, who looked embarrassed and couldn't help shaking the parchment in his hand, pointing to the data on it and asking, "My dear adjutant, I have given you 30,000 vassal troops, and I only ask you to help me attract the attention of the human defenders, but I didn't ask you to use this army as cannon fodder." Although Rohan didn't take this low-strength human army seriously, this city alone suffered nearly 10,000 casualties, which was really terrible. Poor Dario was speechless. This time, he turned a good containment mission into a fueling tactic, which was indeed his dereliction of duty. The resilience of the Bacchus Empire's legion was far beyond his expectations. Although he had received Rohan's warning before, he underestimated the legion's counterattack because he looked down on humans. The most serious time, even those legion soldiers successfully withstood the offensive of the redemption camp and almost pushed back the vassal army near the city wall with javelins and tortoise shell formations. If Rohan had not reserved 2 teams of silver mist guards as a trump card, I'm afraid these unreliable vassal troops would have been defeated by the counterattack of the pent people. Dario also knew the mistake he made. After all, although the vassal troops were numerous, they could not afford to be wasted like this. He could only lower his head and scold. Looking at Dario's pitiful look, Rohan didn't know what to say. After all, he had also seen Dario's tactical arrangements. It was indeed because the vassal troops were too weak that the front line almost collapsed. He couldn't be blamed entirely. Oh, forget it. The next task of cleaning up the remnants of the empire is left to you. Don't let me down again. Please rest assured, my lord. I will make you proud. Dario gritted his teeth and left the square. The teasing and mocking eyes of Anj and other Durachi leaders just now made him feel unprecedented shame. Almost all Durachi hope to step on the corpses of their comrades to rise to power. This is also a traditional art of Durachi society. Although the captains under Rohan did not hurt each other due to the control of the system and their submission to Rohan's personal strength, this did not affect their desire to see each other's jokes. Please, the attention of the Great Lady of Mist and Lord Rohan is always limited. Everyone hopes that they are the lucky one who gets the reward and reward. Rohan knows all about the little calculations of his subordinates. Although he is helpless, this kind of infighting is indeed the nature of all elves. Even a Sir and a Slay are not immune. In this regard, Rohan can only focus on promoting captains like Dario and Anj who have good ability and loyalty, and at the same time reward his subordinates, based on the principle of more rewards for the capable. As for the internal fights between each other, as long as these struggles do not cause substantial harm, but simply embarrass a captain, then Rohan will not interfere. In the square, 4,000 Durachi warriors are quietly waiting for dawn, looking forward to the battle against the castle tomorrow morning. The human servants were comparing with each other, looking at the number of heads and spoils they had captured today, while checking their weapons over and over again, and fell asleep excitedly. Even Wanke was feasting on the piles of corpses. Since there were too many corpses left in the battle, he could only eat more before they rotted. Except for the citizens who were shivering at home, the whole city was looking forward to the arrival of tomorrow, and this city that had never made any movement. At dawn the next day, in front of the castle, listen, everyone inside, lay down your weapons and surrender immediately, otherwise, when the elf army enters the castle, everyone will be killed without mercy. An imperial lackey who had defected to Rohan was holding a small trumpet and shouting in front of the castle, but it was almost noon and there was still no movement in the castle. Seeing this, the lackey couldn't help swallowing his saliva and cautiously came to Rohan, who was wearing sunglasses and lying on a recliner. He looked at the nearby soldiers fearfully and said, "Great conqueror." The group of unruly people inside refused to answer at all. They are so bold. Well, a little interesting. Looking at the castle without any reaction, Rohan's heart was full of doubts. This is a city by the sea. The castle is built not far from the coastline. There is no way there is a tunnel to escape. Lysadilon, are you sure there were really no ships to pick up the nobles last night? My lord, I assure you that it was calm last night. I definitely couldn't have missed any ship. I'm willing to take the initiative. to enter the castle to check the situation. Lysadilin, who was standing next to Rohan, covered his chest and swore. Although he didn't know where so many elf compatriots came from, he wanted to experience the experience of counting money until his hands were soft last night a few more times. Whether they are signed or on older, as long as they have money, they are all good people. Ange looked at the strange elf who came out of nowhere with some suspicion. As the captain of Rohan's personal guard, the appearance of Lysadilin made him feel a little threatened. Judging from the appearance of the Lord, it is obvious that he wants to recruit this guy into the personal guard. This is not okay. How could such a profit-seeking guy be willing to sacrifice his life to protect the Lord? How can I protect the Lord with such a bug? My lord, let me go to the castle to check it out in person. After all, such outsiders cannot be trusted. We should be careful. Watch your words. I have accepted the employment of Lord Rohan. From now on, he is my captain. You should not question my loyalty. Looking at the two people who were about to quarrel, Rohan took off his glasses with a headache. It seems that the plan to form a subsidiary force of the older elves will have to be slowed down. To absorb new elf populations into their own team, not only must the integration of culture and beliefs be achieved, but also the contradictions between the two sides must be adjusted. This is enough to keep Rohan busy for a while. Don't bully the newcomer, Ange. Since Lysadilin is willing to show his ability, give him the opportunity. P.S. I'm about to cough out my lungs. Is this a sequel of the new coronavirus? Cack. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Snake Cult. With the help of the grappling hook and the rope, Lysadilin flexibly climbed over the wall and came to the interior of the castle. Looking at the weapons and armor scattered on the ground, Lysadilin picked up a shield covered with cuts with a solemn expression and looked at the steel crossbow arrows inserted on it and murmured, "Civil strife. No, if it is really a civil strife, there can't be no movement at all." The ground of the castle was full of broken imperial armor and blood-stained weapons, indicating that the owner of the weapon had experienced a tragic war, but there was no body found on the ground. Everything that happened here made him feel an indescribable weirdness, and even his instinct was urging him to leave this place quickly. However, when he thought that, if he returned empty-handed, the annoying fellow named Ang might mock him, Lysadilin couldn't help but grit his teeth, drew his sword, and walked into the castle. Although he didn't know what he would face, he was still very confident in his skills. If he couldn't beat him, wouldn't he just run away? Plop plop in the empty castle. On the wall as Lysadilin kept approaching the castle, the weapons and armor scattered on the ground gradually turned into the black plate armor of the Shadow Legion, which made him feel even more uneasy. Snake Cult. Only the evil believers of Azidahaka would do such a thing. After all, the Snake Cult has been doing evil for many years. No matter how horrific things happened in the Empire, they just put the blame on the Snake Cult. Looking at the wall covered with blood and the hissing sound faintly coming into his ears, Lysadilin finally decided to obey his inner thoughts and prepared to turn around and leave here. Just as Lysadilin put away his weapon and prepared to leave the castle, a strange voice full of charm suddenly came from behind. Hiss, hello, let's have a good chat. Hey, can't you just pretend that I haven't been here? Such a familiar tone and voice made Lysadilin draw his sword helplessly, looking at the beautiful figure hidden in the shadows, as if he was about to say something. In the shadows, the priestess of the snake worship stood there with a scimitar in her hand, with a pair of bright big eyes like a playful sister next door, but Lysadilin dared not relax at all. These priestesses who have been fed with snake venom since childhood are a group of terrifying beings whose poison level is better than his. The two looked at each other like this, and just when the priestess was about to ask Lysadilin about the purpose of the elves, she saw Lysadilin turned around and ran away. Priestess? Exclamation mark. Lysadilin, who was running away, knew in his heart that his mission was reconnaissance. Since he had discovered that this group of snake worship believers had occupied the castle, he had to go back and report the news as soon as possible. Hiss, don't go. Hearing the shouts of the priestess behind him, Lysadilin decisively quickened his pace of escape. He could feel that there were at least several believers of the snake cult around him. This must be a trap and he must leave quickly. Lysadilin, who was fleeing from the castle, didn't know that behind him, the priestess of the snake cult was looking at her back in despair as she left, and asked the believers next to her unwillingly, "Is am I ugly? You didn't even give me a chance to speak. Priest, your beauty is like the stars in the sky. It must be because the light here is too dim." The seriously injured butler Xavius covered his wounds, used up his last strength to say this flattering word, and then slowly closed his eyes. The battle with the 1,000-man commander Havis had caused him to suffer heavy injuries. He was able to hold on until now entirely out of his love for the priestess and his piety towards Dahaka. Seeing this devout believer that she had developed with great difficulty die, the priestess looked anxiously at the few remaining snake worship warriors around her, and finally said helplessly, "Forget it, go and negotiate with the elves. Those knights of the Shadow Legion, Hiss are the biggest threat." Looking at the believers running towards the city wall, a tear flashed in the corner of the priestess's eyes. Why did the situation develop into this? Originally, they only received the task of raiding the Shadow Legion, so they came to the castle with the help of the believers in the city, and ambushed Hathaway and his centurions. According to the plan, they would assassinate the nobles who were bribed by the Red Brotherhood, and then escape from the Imperial port with the help of tens of thousands of believers in the city, waiting for the support of the snake cult army. Everything was going well. The Shadow Legion was suppressed by the snake worship warriors to the inner castle, and only needed a final kick to complete the task. This should have been double the happiness. However, the believers in the city were defeated by the elf army that appeared from nowhere. The Shadow Legion also gained a foothold with the help of the inner castle guards, and launched a counterattack against the snake cult. What should I do? Hiss, I just want to talk. After carefully looking at the elf army outside that was waiting in full battle array, the priestess's beautiful face was crossed. They had a long-standing grudge with the elves, and it was really unclear whether Rohan would agree to let them go. Outside the castle, after a period of explanation, "Sir, those believers of the snake cult are all bad people, and you must not believe what they say." In front of the recliner, Lysadilin was vividly explaining to Rohan the knowledge about the snake cult. His words were full of discrimination and resentment towards the snake cult, and he almost pointed at the priestess's head and scolded her. After listening to Lysadilin's introduction, Dario hesitated for a moment, and couldn't help asking Rohan, who was dozing on the chair, "My lord, if it is true as he said, this god born from the pursuit of power by the Cinder elves, it seems that he can't be called an evil god. Although this god makes those believers who live under her aura weaker than ordinary people, she will also give this power back to those who are truly pious, so that the humblest peasants can also be on par with knights. Compared with the chaos gods in the Warhammer world, or those elven gods as proud as Azuran, this god will at least respond to the believers' requests, and help them through the difficulties." After hearing Dario's inquiry, Rohan couldn't help but touch his chin, thinking for a moment, and said in surprise, "After you said that, I suddenly feel that it seems to be true. Maybe it's because the world of Warhammer is too desperate, or because most elven gods don't care about things. Rohan also feels that, if this god is placed in the worldview of Warhammer, it is considered a good god." Hearing that the Durochis had such a good opinion of Azadahaka, Lysadilin was frightened and hurriedly explained, "That is a god that devours the power of believers. Why didn't you offer sacrifices to your gods before?" Chapter 90. The health bar has dropped by 1%. I'm almost dying. Sacrifice to the gods? Those gods who need sacrifices to give back to their believers are all evil gods. They are heretics. Looking at the somewhat indignant Lysadilin in front of him, Rohan finally understood the cultural differences between the two worlds. You guys want the gods to work for you for nothing? Why should they bless you for no reason? Do you have such a big face? Rohan said that he couldn't understand this selfish idea at all. As a living saint, he can feel the power of faith in everyone. Although it is a bit mysterious, this power can indeed strengthen the projection strength of a god. Usually, the sacrifices offered by believers to the gods they believe in will contain huge power of faith, which is why the evil gods and the four gods of chaos in this world are eager to obtain sacrifices. And now, Lysadilin actually wants to neither offer sacrifices to the gods, nor be blessed by the gods. How can such a good thing happen in the world? However, Rohan has no intention of correcting this idea. After all, his base is still the Durachi elves in the Warhammer world. As long as the elves under his command are devout believers, it will be fine. After accepting the power of faith from two worlds, the current Lady Mist is much stronger than before, so there is no need to worry about the Lady Mist's blessing. Through the telescope, Rohan was able to watch the green armored warriors who appeared on the city wall, and asked Lysadilin curiously, "Don't worry about the gods for now. According to your intelligence, those so-called evil snake cult believers have occupied the castle and posed a serious threat to our rule, right?" "Yes, sir. When I went in, I met a snake cult priestess. She tried to seduce me with sweet words. It was terrible." Lysadilin didn't have any good feelings towards the snake cult believers in the castle. Looking at the slowly opening city gate, he couldn't help but remind him, "Sir, if you must talk to these disgusting snake people, be careful of their snake venom. They can even poison and kill from several meters away. So they use poison." Then I'm relieved. Hearing that the other party was using snake venom, Rohan was immediately relieved. He ignored Lysadilin's dissuasion and reminder, and walked directly towards the charming priestess. After all, as a living saint, he is immune to all poisons, and with the rebirth pills, even if this priestess is a follower of Nurgle, she can't hurt him. Since Rohan has put on the Dreadlord armor, the priestess saw at first glance that Rohan was the commander of the elven army, so she hurriedly stopped and said, "Mr. Elf Commander, please don't come any closer. I have a poison in my body." Rohan did stop, not because he was afraid of the snake venom that the priestess mentioned, but simply out of courtesy to the beautiful woman. After seeing the exquisite face of the priestess, Rohan had a certain understanding of the appearance of the Pender people, so he couldn't help but praise, "It's strange. Why do female villains like you always look so charming? Are you specially used to seduce the protagonist?" I didn't expect such compliments to come from an elf. "Are all you elves handsome guys like you?" After hearing Rohan's praise, the priestess couldn't help but look at Rohan. After praising each other, she took the lead in explaining the reason why she appeared in the castle. "We in the snake cult have no intention of starting a war. We are here just to assassinate the centurion of the Shadow Legion. If the elves want to occupy this city, the snake cult will never stop them. So this is just a misunderstanding. You are just the unlucky ones who happen to be trapped in the castle. What about the people of the Shadow Legion? I don't believe these powerful knights will be easily solved by you. After all, the snake cult is not a big threat to him at all, and the system can directly help him screen out those pagans lurking in the city. If he is really pissed off, he can just capture all the snake cult believers, tie them to stakes and roast them. That way, everyone will be old acquaintances, so there won't be any distinction between you and me." The priestess didn't know what Rohan was thinking. She thought she had met an elf lord with a good character this time, so she took the initiative to remind him, "Those centurions of the Shadow Legion are very cunning. There are at least hundreds of knights hiding in them, who may threaten your rule at any time." "I see. We will deal with the remaining Shadow Legion. Now it's your turn, the snake cult. You and your believers have two choices. First, lay down your weapons and surrender, and become our prisoners. Second, leave this city forever, and ensure that the snake cult will not return to Dillingang." Hearing that Rohan offered such generous conditions, the priestess immediately patted her bulging chest and guaranteed, "I promise you, as long as you are willing to let my people leave this city, the snake cult will never set foot in this city again." Although he said so, Rohan understood that the reason why the other party agreed was just a delaying tactic. After they left the city alive, they would definitely send spies to Dillingang again. But Rohan didn't care about it. As long as the city was classified as a colony by the system, any heretic entering the city would be marked out. It was simply the best spy identifier. At least for a long time in the future, Wanke's food would be settled. Looking at the delicate and poisonous beauty in front of him, Rohan approached her directly, gently lifted her chin with his fingers, looked at her stiff and soft face and said, "See you later, little beauty. Don't let me see you again, otherwise I will have to destroy my hands with spicy flowers. I promise you that we will leave immediately." In addition, you'd better wash your hands with a kind of wormwood. Looking at the elf in front of her who was not afraid of her own snake venom, the priestess hurriedly took the snake worship warriors out of the castle. She was really worried that, if Rohan suddenly died of poison, the surrounding elves would settle accounts with her. After watching the followers of the snake cult leave the city, Rohan took out a rebirth pill from his arms and swallowed it. Looking at the blood bar that had lost 1%, he sighed. What a strong poison, it can actually break my defense. But then, Rohan turned his attention to this quiet castle, and a sinister sneer slowly appeared at the corner of his mouth. He took out the fire phosphorus agent that he had not used for a long time. At the beginning, those ratmen who were hiding in the mine also wanted to fight back by relying on the terrain, but didn't they all become familiar with each other in the end? P.S. I have been looking for information about Pand for a long time, and finally I have found all the information about the snake cult CAC. Chapter 91, Shadow Legion, Destroyed. The knights in the castle walked away uncomfortably. The smell of barbecue in the air increased Rohan's appetite. Even before he entered the bunker, he could already imagine the miserable situation inside. Rohan leaned against the wall with his halberd in his hand. The thick marble walls were all warmed by the roasting, not to mention the miserable situation inside the castle. A total of 20 bottles of pyrophosphorus were enough to turn those tricky armored knights inside into teppanyaki. The faces of the soldiers who were blocking the door with Rohan were full of gloating. The tragedy inside that had been screaming for more than 10 minutes was the best chicken soup for the soul for Dorichi. Anj came to the door and saw that there was no movement inside. He turned to Rohan and said, "It seems that all the humans inside have died. Do we need to open the door?" "Don't worry. After all, these knights are also blessed by gods. Who can guarantee that they will be saved by their gods? Wait until the next batch of fire phosphorus is delivered, and then roast them again." After looking down at the system panel, Rohan shook his head and rejected the eager soldiers around him, intending to continue throwing fire phosphorus into the city. Yesterday, Dario led his musketeers to sweep the remnants of the empire who tried to resist in the city, and the basic public security in the city has been restored. Although many citizens of Dillingang are still dissatisfied with the previous massacre by Daruki, under the strong suppression of force, they still obediently act as coolies and repair the damaged buildings. The Shadow Legion in the castle is the last hostile force in the city that is still resisting. After a while, a silver mist guard came to the castle with a small box in his arms. He handed the box to Rohan carefully and reported, "My lord, these are all the remaining pyrophosphorus in the warehouse, a total of 42 bottles. No need to keep them, throw them all in." Rohan directly handed the glass bottles of pyrophosphorus in the box to the guards, then picked up a bottle and threw it into the high window. Most of these windows are small windows for ventilation. The pyrophosphorus thrown in will immediately ignite the interior of the castle and take away the oxygen inside by burning. After watching the remaining pyrophosphorus being thrown in, Rohan took out a pocket watch and started timing, waiting for a few more hours to burn, and then they would go in after the temperature inside dropped. At this time, the interior of the castle had completely become a purgatory on earth. Both the ceiling and the ground were ignited by the sticky pyrophosphorus, forming a terrifying fire tornado. The flames continued to devour everything around them. The murals and books that were once treasured by the nobles had already turned into ashes and became dust in the air. Hundreds of twisted corpses burned to charcoal were falling to the ground, flowing on the floor with armors that had turned into molten iron. However, it was in this purgatory of fire that there was still a glimmer of hope. In the cellar that was used to store fine wine, dozens of remaining shadow centurions were huddled in front of a small ventilation window, greedily opening their mouths to breathe in the faint sea breeze. These noble knights had long since taken off their once precious armor, and the iron rings on each person's chest were emitting a faint yellow light. That was the glory of the goddess of harvest blessing them. Hathaway, the centurion of the Shadow Legion, stood alone in the corner, giving the position of the vent to the young knights. Looking at the shining iron ring on his chest and the soldiers around him who died of lack of oxygen, Hathaway knew that this was a symbol of the goddess of harvest encouraging them to fight to the death. Thinking of this, the centurion who was once known as the head wolf could only close his eyes helplessly and wait for the flames outside to go out. As an old officer who has lived for nearly 100 years, he is not afraid of death, but as someone who has experienced the rebellion era, he also knows that this battle is the last battle of the Shadow Legion. Whether it is the Emperor Marius and his lackeys, the Immortals, who have long been dissatisfied with them, or the Knights of the Radiant Cross, who have completely joined the Protestant Church, they will never let them go. Even the Shadow Wolf Pack, who have always suspected that they are involved with the snake cult, will definitely launch a siege against their remaining centurions. When Hathaway thought of this, his heart could not help but fall into a dead ash. It seems that the Shadow Legion can no longer escape the fate of destruction this time. After an unknown amount of time, Hathaway slowly opened his eyes, feeling the cool air around him, slowly stood up, and picked up the blunt javelin, and said to the centurions around him, "Centurions of the Shadow Legion, our final moment has finally arrived." After hearing Hathaway's words, the remaining 40 centurions put on their armor, picked up their shields and imperial broadswords, and their eyes were full of despair and determination. After several hours of painful struggle, they had already confirmed their own hearts, and at the same time, they were ready to die with the enemies outside. Looking at the familiar faces, Hathaway touched the iron ring on his chest, then put on his wolfskin helmet, and came to the door with the centurions, shouting passionately, "Knights, our legion commander was once a traitor of the snake cult. Even the ruler of Imperial Port, Admiral Karras, was corrupted by the damn giant snake, and became one of them. Now, it's time to prove our loyalty to Daimia. The noble Shadow Legion will never succumb to the snake cult. Attack. Towards death and fire." After hearing Hathaway's passionate speech, the centurions raised their weapons and prepared to fight the snake cult outside. These poor knights didn't know that the believers of the snake cult had already evacuated and thought that the snake cult had occupied the city and they were the last hope of the city. Seeing that the knight's emotions had been aroused by him, Hathaway rushed to the door of the cellar first, pushed it open and shouted, "Follow me." A wave of heat instantly hit him, and the hot air made Hathaway a little breathless, but this did not affect his determination to die. The gate in the distance had been opened. In the bright sunlight, he could see rows of human soldiers in iron armor lined up there. They must be believers of the snake cult. Kill all these evil believers of the snake cult. Dario blinked his eyes and looked at the centurions who crawled out of the cellar in some surprise. Since he did not have language proficiency, like Rohan, he did not understand what Hathaway was shouting. He volunteered to lead his musketeers into the castle for a sweep, and happened to meet the Shadow Legion rushing out. Looking at these knights struggling to rush towards him through the sea of fire, Dario slowly took out 2 pistols, and shouted at these knights, "Aim." Clatter. Hundreds of muskets instantly aimed at the knights who were charging. A hint of mockery appeared under the reddish-brown beard of the Franks. They just like to bully these tin cans who can't use long-range weapons fire. Chapter 92. Ladies' Confusion. That day, the last knights of the Shadow Legion passed away peacefully. The newly captured slaves dragged the piles of dried corpses and minced meat out of the castle with trembling hands, and at the same time, they tried to clean up the bloodstains in the room while suppressing their nausea. The owners of these corpses were once glorious knights that they could not reach, but now they are just fodder for wild dogs. TSK, the fire was too fierce at the beginning. It will cost too much to rebuild this castle now. Looking at the marble walls in the castle that were almost melted by the burn, Rohan couldn't help but have a headache. The time and money required to rebuild this castle made Rohan feel that it was not worth it, but in order to establish a colony as soon as possible, these expenses were necessary. After all, if you want to spread the faith of the Lady of the Mist, you need to build this city gorgeously enough to set off the nobility of Rajlia. Looking at the statue of the goddess of harvest being demolished outside, Rohan suddenly felt that he hadn't talked to the Lady of the Mist for a while, which was not okay. Believers, Xiangao, need to show up in front of their own gods frequently so that they have a greater chance of being chosen as the chosen one. Bete. Although Rohan has now been blessed as a living saint, his strength is still a billion points behind those of the 4 chaos gods. Moreover, the development of Grand Town has almost reached its limit, so Rohan now urgently needs to find a new territory in the Warhammer world. Come to think of it, I'm more or less a demigod now. Should I consider settling down somewhere else? Thinking of this, Rohan couldn't help but open his already excellent system panel, with a silly smile on his face. Rohan, the dread colonist, armor strength. 90, silver shield, leadership. 80, immune to terror, movement speed. 48, full of physical strength, melee attack. 48, magic attack, melee defense. 80, living saint, melee power. 380, armor piercing damage, charge bonus. 45 over 65, divine bound skills, shield of mist, divine praise, soul quenching. Sure enough, the mage is looking. A reckless man who can only wield swords and guns all his life has no future, no matter how strong he is. Looking at the 3 skills in his skill bar, Rohan couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth, and he was ready to try out his 2 new skills. The Lord Witch King did make a law that no male Darachi is allowed to practice magic, but this kind of magic that the gods have blessed him to use directly is not within the scope of the law. Unlike those hypocritical wizards who still rely on the wind of magic to cast magic, the canonized Rohan can directly create magic power in his body to complete the internal consumption of casting spells. In other words, the closer the connection with the Lady of the Mist, the stronger the spells Rohan can cast. Thinking of this, Rohan was excited to go to the suburbs. He wanted to test his skills and study the dog licking quotes at the same time. It's decided. Anyway, it's all licking. Instead of hugging the illusory thighs and licking, it's better to hug the goddess and lick all the way to the bed. In the void, Rajlia, QIU. After sneezing for no apparent reason, Rajlia couldn't help but touch her nose. Looking at the faint light spots around her, she couldn't help but exclaimed, "It's worthy of being a new world. Not only does it have such abundant power of faith, it can even make my clone sneeze. It's really amazing." Just now, she, who came through the world, was stared at by a goddess named Damia. This strange goddess immediately rebuked her believers for killing innocent people. After listening to Damia's words, Rajlia realized that it was probably Rohan who had launched an attack on this world, so she simply went all out and defeated this weak local goddess. She, who absorbed the power of faith from 2 worlds, is no longer the weak goddess who was trapped in the Temple of Iris and could only be bullied by other gods. And the goddess who called herself Damia turned into light spots all over the sky after being defeated by her. That was the power of faith that symbolized the power of God. After slowly absorbing these light spots into her body, Rajlia felt her ever-increasing divine power and couldn't help but sighed with some sadness. What's the difference between me and those terrible chaos gods? Unlike other elven gods, as the patron saint of travelers, Rajlia's personality is indeed relatively gentle, which also led to her being bullied by Lilith in the past. Original plot. It's writing is too bad. I added some original works without authorization. Who is in favor and who is against? The reason why she agreed to Rohan's missionary work in the other world is to be able to develop believers in the other world and enhance her own strength. But if every missionary work has to conflict with the gods of the main world and snatch believers from other gods, what is the difference from the corruption spread by the 4 chaos gods? She used to be just a little god hiding in the small land of Iris, and she didn't even have the power to fight back when her believers were bullied by the Great Horned Rat. But now, the name of the Lady of the Mist has been believed by countless people in both worlds. They believe in her devoutly, and her strength has unknowingly become far beyond the past. Looking at the disappearing light spots around her, Rajlia was somewhat silent. The sudden surge in strength made her fall into infinite confusion about the future. Just as she was in infinite confusion, she suddenly heard Rohan's familiar voice, but this time the panic in her tone made Rajlia a little confused. "Boss, fairy sister, are you there? Emergency, need support." Because Rajlia was added to special care, she could accurately receive every prayer of Rohan. Hearing Rohan's slightly anxious inquiry, Rajlia's consciousness immediately crossed the sky and landed beside Rohan, curiously asking, "My believer, why are you so panicked? My dear lady, we just took over this city and the nearby villages, but after we destroyed the original goddess statue named Damia, the surrounding land suddenly became desolate." After noticing the arrival of the Lady of Mist, Rohan hurriedly showed Rajlia the withered yellow leaves and dry land around. Although he is not a life mage, as a living saint, Rohan can still feel that there is a vitality slowly fading from this land. Although he doesn't know what happened, Rohan can still guess that Daemia, known as the Harvest Goddess, has been solved by the Mist Lady. PS. Do you really want to create a book club? I have never managed a group, and I'm afraid I won't be able to manage it by then. CAC. Chapter 93 God Making Plan. No, not only the vitality, but also a disgusting force is devouring the vitality of this land. Compared to Rohan, who was not familiar with divine power, Rajlia saw at a glance the reason why this land was barren, that there was a force devouring the earth. The reason why this land had been able to remain prosperous and lush was because Daemia had been protecting this land from the invasion of evil forces. However, now that Daemia has merged with Rajlia, and after losing the protection of the goddess of harvest, this unguarded land was immediately coveted by the evil god of the snake cult, Azidahaka. After noticing this situation, Rajlia's divine consciousness immediately rose, and with her majestic divine power, she could see the entire land of the Bacchus Empire. After losing the protection of the goddess of harvest, the land in the entire empire was under varying degrees of threat. In the fields and forests, countless plants became dry due to the lack of life in the soil. In the villages in the countryside, the villagers watched in horror as countless poisonous snakes crawled out of the woods. They greedily devoured poultry and killed ordinary people who were unprepared. After receiving the call of the snake god, heretics, evil gods, what a blasphemy. After witnessing these tragedies, the kind-hearted Lady of the Mist immediately became angry, rolled up her sleeves, and prepared to argue with the unknown Azidahaka. Subconsciously, she had already regarded these imperial people as her believers, so how could she watch them being slaughtered by the gods? Exclamation mark. However, before Rajlia could take action, Rohan hurriedly stopped her. Rohan took out the silver cross symbolizing the Lady of Mist from his chest, and the faint white light of the living saint shone from him. He suggested to Rajlia, "My dear lady, I understand your eagerness to save the people of the empire from the water and fire, but don't you think you should let the people know you first? Tell me more specifically? Look, most of the people in the Bacchus Empire don't know you've come yet, so even if you use your divine power to save them, they will only think that it's the goddess of harvest appearing. Why don't you?" Hearing Rohan's suggestion to her, Rajlia's eyebrows rose slightly. She had just devoured Daemia, and she immediately went to snatch the other party's believers. Is this good? This is very good. Thinking of this, Rajlia nodded with satisfaction. When she was about to leave, she was suddenly stopped by Rohan. He rubbed his hands and explained with a smile, "Madam, through my observation of the humans on this continent, I found that the humans here have a very bad habit. That is, they like to get things for free. I think we must severely crack down on this unhealthy trend. For this reason, I think the believers here should be divided into necessary levels. Those truly devout believers, the areas where they live, should be purified first, and we should also relax our policies towards these devout believers on weekdays, and give them a certain degree of tax reduction benefits." That's right. What Rohan recommended to Rajlia was the famous, notorious, membership system in the previous life. Those pagans want to get the blessing of the lady for free. Wishful thinking. Only those devout believers who are willing to donate to the Temple of the Mist, or fanatics who are willing to give their hearts to the Lady of the Mist, are eligible to receive the Lady's mercy. Those merchants and nobles should actively donate to the temple every year, to prove their piety to the Lady of the Mist. As the official living saint designated by the Lady of the Mist, Rohan believes that he has the obligation to keep these wealth in his own small treasury and use them to develop the temple when needed. As for the poor masses, who have no money, they can donate their lives. In order to spread the faith of the Lady of the Mist to more worlds, they can join Rohan's expeditionary force and contribute to the cause of the Mistwalker. As long as they serve for 50 years, there are exquisite life extension gift packages and blessings waiting for them, so that they can better serve the lady. After serving for 100 years, they will be given another 50-year gift package, and there is a chance to be selected by the Lady of the Mist and become a Mistwalker who can rival the Chaos Demon. Thinking of this, Rohan's heart couldn't help but ripple. If this plan can be implemented smoothly, it can at least bring in millions of gold coins. Isn't this more cost effective than hiding in Grand Town and being a simple lion or boss? Exclamation mark. After listening to Rohan's description, Rajlia hesitated. Doing so will indeed help spread her faith, but will it be too despicable? However, Rohan's next words immediately dispelled her hesitation. "Dear lady, we need to face the evil chaos gods. Special situations certainly require special treatment. As your power grows stronger, are we going to watch other travelers being persecuted?" As the patron saint of lost things and travelers, Rajlia naturally understood the threat of chaos to the world, so she said with a hard heart, "Okay, in order to destroy chaos and save those corrupted worlds, this is a necessary sacrifice." Rajlia, who was still a little confused, finally made up her mind at this moment. She destroyed chaos and saved those mortals threatened by chaos. Looking at the thick fog that gradually spread around, and the firm voice of the Lady of the Mist, Rohan's mouth corners rose slightly, and then he set off, to continue to the open space in the suburbs. Save the world? What a joke. As long as the greed and desire in the world still exist, the four dead fat Oticus in the subspace will never be destroyed. If you want to truly destroy the four chaos gods, you need to destroy the source of their ideological reflection. This amount of work, it's faster to just destroy the world. Anyway, Rohan's goal is just to protect his own piece of land. Since he doesn't expect to completely destroy the four chaos gods, he might as well create a fifth god for himself. Rohan, who can travel through countless worlds, can fully recruit countless believers for the Lady of the Mist. In theory, as long as there are enough believers, Rajlia can become a goddess who can rival the four chaos gods. Moreover, the system has been bound to the Lady of the Mist. Compared with those four ugly fat guys, isn't an elf god with fair skin, beautiful face and long legs more attractive? Thinking of this, Rohan hummed a little tune and prepared to find a vacant land to test his magic. P.S. It's finally almost time to be put on the shelves. I'll see if I can work hard and save some money cack. Chapter 94 The Distressed Emperor. On the desolate plain, the yellow dead grass and the dirty mud pits full of toads everywhere all show the harm caused by the death of the harvest goddess. Click 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 click. The green python hiding in the field slowly raised its head. After noticing the sound of horse hooves getting closer and closer, it couldn't help but feel a burst of joy in its heart. Since a few days ago, a voice full of benevolence has always sounded in its heart. Although it can't understand what the other party is saying, it can understand the meaning. Go kill, go devour, and try to be the best child. During this time, it has been lying in ambush on this path, constantly devouring passers-by and messengers, which has made its physique expand to an incredible length of nearly 10 meters. The female snake god gave it the ability to digest and grow quickly, but at the same time it also made its stomach never satisfied. After slightly sticking out its tongue to sense the airflow around it, the green python hiding in the grass suddenly pounced forward, ready to strangle the target with its powerful death coil and sharp fangs. Crack. This is the seventh one. It's hard to imagine that the snake cult can become so rampant. After slowly pulling the mace out of the green python's crushed revelation, the knight in white crossplate armor shook off the blood on the hammerhead with some disgust, with a hint of helplessness in his eyes. As a knight of the Knights of the Glorious Cross, he has been carrying out the experiments he set, using his medical knowledge to help those poor passers-by in need free of charge. However, now, the entire empire has fallen into unprecedented turmoil, catching everyone off guard. Whether it is the snake cult that is looting everywhere, or the Desha Legion that comes to take advantage of the fire, they are forcing the leader of the empire, Emperor Marius, to issue a new decree, abandon the several fortresses that are being fought over on the front line, and use all military forces to suppress rebellion and famine. After putting the mace back on his waist, the knight looked at the bloodstains on the ground in the bulging belly of the green python, and couldn't help praying in his heart, Goddess of Harvest, if you still love your people and your pious children, please exile these terrible filth as soon as possible. This loyal knight of the empire didn't know that the goddess of harvest he mentioned had long since become the most primitive power of faith and a part of the goddess of mist. Ceylon City, the capital of the Bacchus Empire. On the streets that were once bustling with people, only a few suspicious passers-by were hurrying on the road. The indifferent wheel marks on the ground that could be traced by the naked eye were telling the misery of the city. The people didn't know what had happened. When they saw the withered plants and the venomous snakes climbing over the wall, they returned home and blocked the doors and windows. The entrance of the once magnificent palace was now overgrown with weeds. Some Legion soldiers stared at the ground nervously, worried that the venomous snakes that might suddenly jump out of the grass would bite them. Inside the palace, it was a completely different scene. Come, have another drink. Ha ha ha, come and see the letter of reprimand from Governor Karras. He actually thinks that the loss of Dillingang is our responsibility. Hey, the stone statue of the goddess Damia shed tears of blood for some reason. I really don't know where the future of the empire will go. Don't worry about that. Come and see the gems I looted from Odesha village. They are even more dazzling than the stars in the sky. A grand banquet was in progress. Dozens of generals and governors who had gathered were toasting and drinking. They didn't seem to care about the people who were already in dire straits outside. If the untouchables died, they died. As long as it didn't affect the wine that could be delivered to the city on time tomorrow, they didn't bother to pay attention. To them, the venomous snakes and riots that had been appearing recently were just an invasion by the snake cult army. They only needed to assemble their legions and attack, and they could easily crush them. As for the scholars who advised them to offer sacrifices to the goddess of harvest, they must have been bewitched by the snake worship, so they spoke so wildly. Instead of spending a lot of money and financial resources to pray to the illusory goddess, it is better to use the money to recruit more soldiers and form a new legion. The money earned here is much more than holding sacrifices. Looking at the generals toasting below, Emperor Marius, who was sitting in the main seat, also took a sip of wine and closed his eyes depressedly after looking at the various war reports in his hands. The war with the Principality of Dexia has lasted for more than half a year. The border territories of both sides have long been reduced to ruins and cannot provide stable tax revenue. In the empire, small groups of snake worshippers are constantly harassing the villagers, and even some security teams are not their opponents. Dillingang was occupied by an elf army that emerged from nowhere, and he didn't even want to read the war reports sent back from the front line. Giant snakes spewing flames, thundering catapults, and even human slaves who surrendered to the elves. What the hell? He had only been fighting outside for a few years. How come the country had become a paradise full of vitality, with everything bursting out and filled with wonderful creatures? Exclamation mark. Looking at these generals who had no sense of crisis and were completely immersed in pleasure and recalling the past when they first arrived in Penda, Emperor Marius couldn't help but sigh. I really miss that time. We almost broke through the city of Solian and completely unified Penda. At that time, he was still a young general called General Osa. Under his command, the expeditionary forces of the Cubax Empire continued to gallop across the continent of Penda, conquering one city and fortress after another. However, with the assassination of the old emperor by the snake cult, the entire Cubax Empire fell into a bloody civil war and was finally defeated one by the snake cult. After losing the aid from his motherland, General Osa had guessed that the snake cult would not let go of his expeditionary force that was isolated overseas, so he simply went all out and established the new Bacchus Empire. After being crowned as emperor, General Osa called himself Emperor Marius and carried out a series of reforms on his legions and finally successfully led the generals to gain a foothold in the southern part of Penda. After recalling the glory of the past, Emperor Marius looked at these generals who had drunk beer bellies, walked down the stage and scolded them. My old friends, when did we become so cowardly? If it were us in the past, we should be ambitiously discussing how to retake Dillingang and expel the snake cult. Chapter 95 Ladies Currency. Due to the encroachment of Azdahaka, the vitality of the entire Bacchus Empire was devoured, and countless innocent souls became part of the power of the evil goddess. However, compared to the empire that had turned into a wasteland, the ecological environment of Dillingang has returned to its previous state. The land that was originally dry and cracked due to the loss of nutrients has been moistened again, and the thick white fog shrouded Dillingang and the surrounding seas, isolating any evil forces from approaching. Countless poisonous snakes fled back to the bushes in fear, as if this would cover up the heinous crimes they committed against the victims. However, the anger of the Mist Lady is endless. In the woods, a professional team composed of newly recruited Pend militiamen was carefully walking through the trail. The militiamen held Roman-style broad shields and short swords, looking vigilantly at the dense jungle around them, with a trace of panic in their eyes from time to time. They received a report from a nearby village that a group of terrible snake worshippers were hiding nearby, so they could be attacked by the snake worshippers at any time. Normally, newly recruited militiamen like them would not receive such a mission to face a strong enemy. After all, their combat effectiveness is limited, and they are no match for those cruel and cunning snake worshippers. However, if a top boss comes to lead the team to bomb the fish pond, it will be another experience. Soul quenching. A light blue fireball streaked through the trees, and any branches it touched on the way turned black and exuded a smell of corruption. Boom. A dazzling white light instantly lit up from the depths of the woods, and even the militiamen who had been prepared for it subconsciously covered their eyes with shields. Along the way, they have experienced more than a dozen such encounters, but even so, they are still deeply afraid of this powerful force that deprives the soul. Sure enough, after the light faded, the militiamen put down their shields, and what came into view were several pale bodies of snake worshippers. They all had gentle smiles on their faces, as if they saw the happiness of their lives before they died. What's strange is that the surface of the heavy mail armor on these dead snake worshippers, which is indestructible for the militia, has no trace of being pierced. These are all good armors. Don't forget to take them off and wash them. You can still use them. Rohan looked at the pale corpses on the ground with satisfaction. This new power is so fascinating. No wonder everyone is scrambling to be a magician. It's worthy of being a high-level magic. This kind of fire that can directly penetrate armor and crush the soul is really chilling. And compared to those Asur mages who have gone through untold hardships to learn and study how to arrange the wind of magic, Rohan's spells only need to ensure that the magic power in his body is sufficient, and he can release it by raising his hand. And as a living saint, characteristic continues to nourish his body. The magic power in his body continues to grow with his body. Now he can perform 5 soul quenching or 4 sacred praises in a row in an environment without the wind of magic and stay energetic. Coupled with the mist shield that can self-regulate the consumption of magic power, Rohan is now an excellent mage who combines offense and defense. If he encounters a strong enemy, Rohan can use the powerful soul quenching to consume a wave first, and then rush up for close combat. During this period, Rohan can repair any injuries he suffers with a large amount of rebirth pills, so that he can always maintain a high intensity close combat. After he consumes the opponent's physical strength with his never tired body, he will wretchedly pull away, and then continue to attack with the restored magic power. A set of combos is seamless. With this set of fighting methods, in just 1 month, many of the chosen ones of the snake cult blessed by Aztahaka have died tragically under his halberd. The most elite silver mist warriors were also divided into several teams by Rohan, responsible for leading the newly recruited pen soldiers to clean up the remnants of the snake cult near the imperial port. Looking at the shivering snake worshippers hiding in the cave not far away, Rohan slowly put away the staff used for camouflage and shouted to the new recruits around him, "It's almost done. You can deal with these remaining pagans. Remember what I told you to do. Be careful." Yes. After hearing Rohan's order, these pen soldiers began to show their strong physical fitness, pulling out the javelins behind them and throwing them at the enemy 100 meters away. Watching the javelins draw perfect arcs in the air and accurately fall into the battle formation of the snake worshippers, Rohan raised his eyebrows slightly and couldn't help but exclaimed, "This accuracy and strength are already comparable to those Norscan monkey predators." It's really hard to imagine that as a low magic world that is not too popular, humans can actually have such a strong physique, which is simply the best tool to fight against chaos. Moreover, after a period of training, these native soldiers of Pen can actually be trained into knights who are not inferior to the champion level of predators, which can be said to be good value for money. A little knowledge: Chaos champions refer to the most outstanding people in their own profession, such as the Plunderer champion, Chaos warrior champion, and God's chosen champion. The classification of this thing is too messy. GW itself has not figured it out. Every Norscan warband has its own champion, so champions are not rare. When he unifies the continent of Penda in the future, the huge number of troops that this continent can provide for him, just imagining it makes him a little excited. Just as Rohan was immersed in his reverie about the future, the battle in front of him had come to an end. "Lord, we have a total of 12 soldiers injured. Please take a look." With Rohan personally supporting the battle, these new recruits quickly dealt with those weak snake worshippers, and then skillfully carried the wounded to Rohan. They knew that, as long as they were not missing any limbs, no matter how serious the injuries were, they could recover here with Rohan. Rohan came to the front of the wounded with his staff, looking at some of the festering wounds on their bodies, which were the result of being stabbed by sharp blades soaked in snake venom. The soldiers knelt on the ground in struggle. Rohan pretended to be an old charlatan, and walked in front of them. He squinted his eyes, and scolded them harshly. Foolish believers, pick up the silver cross on your chest and pray to the Lady of the Mist for your mistakes. You have already dedicated your bodies to the Lady of the Mist, so your bodies are the lady's currency. Cherish them. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96, Legion Assembles. Woo, woo, woo. I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so careless. This caused me to get hurt. It seems that my daily training is not enough. Great Lady of the Mist, please forgive my sins. I shouldn't let your currency be damaged for no reason. I'm the lady's currency. I'm the lady's currency. Regardless of whether these recruits are sincerely confessing to the Lady of the Mist, Rohan can feel that there are some firefly-like light spots flashing in their bodies. That is the power of their faith. As long as they call the name of the Lady of the Mist in their hearts, this power can be absorbed by Rajlia and become a force for her. Rohan looked at these human believers with satisfaction. The reason why he split up the Silver Mist warriors and assigned them to the recruits was to make these elven warriors blessed by the Lady of the Mist become temporary missionaries. These Silver Mist warriors are like the political commissars of the Empire. They have to preach their loyalty to the Lady of the Mist over and over again every day to these recruits who have just converted to the Lady of the Mist. Although this behavior of dispersing the main force to preach may weaken the combat effectiveness of the Rohan army in a short period of time, the effect is still very good. Whether it was the citizens of Imperial Port or the Pend natives who joined Rohan for a living, they all became the basic believers of Lady of the Mist. Even Rajlia could sense that her faith was spreading rapidly on this continent, and even many people in the control area of the Bacchus Empire began to believe in her. Seeing that these recruits had already strengthened their inner faith, Rohan put down his staff with satisfaction, pointed his hand at these injured recruits, and said in his mouth, "Lady of the Mist has forgiven you. It's time to accept the blessing from her. Feel the sacred baptism." A white light slowly spread from Rohan's hand, and the sky blue energy continued to nourish the bodies of the wounded soldiers around and purify their flesh. These wounded only felt a chill coming from their wounds, and the high-level magic power was constantly repairing their wounds and purifying the snake venom inside. Even those uninjured recruits, after being illuminated by this light, felt their brains relax unprecedentedly, and their fatigue was relieved. Advanced spells, Holy Praise, replenishes HP of soldier model, provides features, causes terror. Although he was not able to master this complex advanced magic skillfully at first, he has successfully mastered this skill through continuous experiments on the recruits. Praise the Lady. Looking at the snake venom and the faint holy light that had disappeared from their bodies, both the wounded soldiers and the soldiers watching cheered. Although they knew that this power was only temporary, they were still deeply fascinated by it. And this is exactly the effect that Rohan wanted. Looking at the encouraged recruits, Rohan raised his staff and ordered, "Keep going. As long as you can eliminate more followers of the evil goddess, you will have a chance to receive the blessing of the Lady. Kill all the pagans. Victory belongs to the Lady of the Mist." Rohan drew the tempting pie, and every soldier screamed, wishing that they could immediately rush to those damned evil god followers to fight for the Lady. In order to speed up the conquest of this continent, it is necessary to stimulate the enthusiasm of these Pend natives with pancakes. Bacchus Empire, CU and City empty. The orderly footsteps resounded through the sky, awakening the citizens who were hiding in their homes. Some old citizens showed a hint of surprise on their faces. They had not heard such a sound for a long time. It was the footsteps of the Imperial army. Even the poisonous snakes that were originally wandering on the streets were frightened by the sudden vibration and hid in the bushes, sticking out their tongues in fear. Citizens opened their windows and doors, walked curiously onto the streets, and asked each other curiously, "What's going on? Did a knight's team enter the city? I don't know. Maybe it's the immortal knights? We haven't seen them for a long time, since the war started. Are they back?" However, when they walked onto the streets to check what happened, they all widened their eyes in surprise. Tens of thousands of soldiers from the Imperial Legion were lined up in the fountain square in the center of the city, and hundreds of phalanxes of 100 men were standing on the ground, moving slowly with the sound of military trumpets. On the streets leading to the outskirts of the city, thousands of fully armed knights were caressing their heavily armored war horses, looking at the palace with eyes full of loyalty. An elderly man stood up tremblingly, picked up an eagle flag, and rushed to the street despite his family's obstruction, shouting with tears in his eyes, "The Legion is back. Welcome home, young men. Well done." The citizens around also reacted quickly, taking out flower baskets and fruits that had not yet withered from their homes, and excitedly threw them to these warriors, who had made great contributions to the empire. In the palace, the generals and governors who were originally a little decadent had already put on heavy lath armor, and their faces also showed their due pride. The war teams of 12 legions and several knights were rushing back to the country one after another. A full 60,000 legion soldiers and thousands of knights would be a powerful force that would shake the continent of Pendor. In front of the brass cast throne, Emperor Marius was looking at the envelope in his hand with satisfaction. This was the peace terms sent by Bahad Khan Katan, the leader of the Principality of Desha. In order to resolve the corrupt situation in the country as soon as possible, he ordered his legions to storm the border town of Sinjal, the Principality of Desha, and use this as a condition for peace talks. He did not believe that Bahad Khan would be willing to continue fighting against his powerful legions when the domestic court was becoming increasingly rampant. Pendor also has an inquisition, but like the Knights of the Ebony Gauntlet, they are all human supremacists, and believe in the goddess of justice, Astalia, and are extremely exclusive of other pagans. With this contract, we can finally free up our strength to deal with the snake cult and the elves. After touching the somewhat cold brass throne, Emperor Marius stood up and raised the sword of the orator, the national treasure of the Bacchus Empire, in his hand, and shouted to the archons below who were already impatient, "We have lost contact with the goddess Damia, allowing the evil goddess to encroach on our territory. The snake cult is rampant in our land, and the elves have taken advantage of the fire to occupy our cities. Now, it's time to fight for the Bacchus Empire. In order to prevent the tragedy that happened before from happening again, and for our people to survive in this troubled time, let us encircle and suppress those rebels. P.S. It will be on the shelves tomorrow. I will try to save up more cash." Chapter 97 Remarks on the release. First of all, I wish you all a happy new year. Did we talk about the new year? This year is the year of the rabbit, so there is nothing much to wish for. I will just wish my readers a big ox. To be honest, I don't know what to say about my feelings for writing a novel and persisting until it is put on the shelves for the first time in my life. After all, the book friends who have been following it from the beginning know that I was still a newbie who had a hard time updating 2,000 words a day at the beginning. I can persist until now thanks to everyone's company. As for the update issue that I have always wanted to avoid talking about, I'm a lazy dog, but I tried my best. The people in the author group worked all night last night, and they were all like tentacle monsters. What kind of monster is 4,000 words in an hour? Exclamation mark. In theory, it should be updated explosively after it is put on the shelves, but the editor only said that it would be put on the shelves the day before yesterday. As everyone knows, I'm a person who does not keep drafts. Today I locked myself in the room and rushed out a few chapters no matter what. I just hope that everyone can give me a first order. In addition, I have to talk about the plot issue. The current world line is the Prophecy of Pendor. Although it is a classic mod of Mount and Blade, I believe that not all book friends have played it. If you are really not interested in this paragraph, just bookmark it and come back to read it when the world lines of Game of Thrones and The Lord of the Rings come later. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to my friends for their continued support. Lily is not a Lily. Thank you, big brother. Crow under the sycamore tree. Thank you, in memory of the first book friend who gave me a reward. The sow in your backyard. Thank you. Shameful responsibility. Hades Rabbit Witch. Book Ghost 000. Night Mirren. Girls Frontline. Hollow Knight. Grey Jay. Linen Kingquin. Zunxiu Mufang. Thousands of Cats. Major Yuri of the French Chasseurs. Dead Branches and Rotten Leaves with Broken Wings. Jinling Dark Feather. Greatsword Soldier. Emp 117. The Lime Tree in my hometown. Purely typed by hand. Please forgive me if there are any typos. And for those who don't have book titles, I can't type them out because the background can't display your names. I'm very sorry, CAC. Finally, as for the first order, just give a little according to your own opinion, CAC. Preliminary statement. Chapters 104 to 114 are written like shit. If you don't like reading, I suggest you skip them. Chapter 98 Imperial Expedition. With the support of Emperor Marius, an expedition against the snake cult and the elves was soon launched. 12 legions swept through the lands polluted by the snake cult. Led by the brave knights, the soldiers swept through the entire empire with an overwhelming attitude. Tens of thousands of snake cult believers lost their lives in this sweep. Facing the powerful imperial legions, the believers who were once just farmers and mercenaries had no power to resist. Even the Cobra warriors who came from the distant Cubax Empire to support them across the ocean did not have any advantage when facing the Empire's guided missiles of the Javelin Knights. Quick! Retreat! In the dense bushes near the village of Fidena in the south of the Empire, several Cobra warriors were covering a snake cult priestess for evacuation. It was not difficult to see from the wear and tear on their green plate armor and the constantly panting war horses that they had not had a good rest for a long time. Da-da-da-da. Hearing a rumbling sound coming from behind, the priestess bit her lips anxiously and kept whipping the horse under her crotch, which had already been exhausted, and at the same time, ordered the two Cobra warriors beside her, "You go and hold him back. Don't let him catch up again." After receiving the order, the two Cobra warriors immediately pulled the reins, pulled out the terrifying giant axe hanging on their backs without saying a word, and turned their heads to prepare to meet a heavy armored cavalry behind them. They have received the most rigorous training of the snake cult since childhood, and each of them is a powerful warrior. However, when facing this knight who survived in the legend, they seemed so powerless. The Grand Commander of the Shadow Legion, Ragnar, seeing that the knight was still some distance away from them, a snake cult warrior suddenly jumped off the saddle, aimed at the big tree next to him, and chopped several times. Crack. The 1-meter wide tree trunk was cut in half by the giant axe, and the more than 10-meter long tree fell directly towards Ragnar, who was rushing not far away. Facing the uncle falling towards him, Ragnar seemed to be completely unprepared, still riding the iron-blooded horse under his crotch, and rushing towards them. Boom. The tree trunk fell straight into the middle of the road, and the smoke and dust instantly made the two Cobra warriors lose sight of Ragnar. It seemed that the legendary knight had been easily crushed to death by the fallen tree. However, the Cobra warriors did not let down their guard. They were originally a snake worship war group of hundreds of people, but now there are only a few of them left, all thanks to him. Here we come. The two Cobra warriors pulled out sharp javelins from the sleeves on their backs and slowly aimed at the dispersing mist. Their venomous snake perception was constantly urging him to stay away from here, but out of their love for the priestess and their loyalty to the evil goddess, they could only grit their teeth and stick to it. Snap. A black shadow smashed the entire tree trunk like an indestructible steel bull, and then they saw a black armored knight sitting on a war horse wearing the same heavy plate armor, holding a black iron spear, and rushing towards them. It was Ragnar who had been chasing them here. The Cobra warriors were not to be outdone. The warrior on horseback threw a javelin at Ragnar, and then rushed forward with a giant axe. He was determined to die, and he had decided to use his body to buy time for the priestess to escape. Unfortunately, some things are destined not to be done by determination. The javelin was picked up by Ragnar with a black iron spear in midair, and then he rushed towards the two with red eyes without slowing down. The black iron spear, forged from the unique ebony steel of the Pand continent, is world-renowned for its indestructibility and great quality. The black iron spear in Ragnar's hand is a terrifying spear made entirely of ebony steel. Even the strongest Imperial Knight would find it difficult to lift it, let alone swing it. However, such a terrifying weapon was easily wielded in Ragnar's hand like an ordinary long stick, used to pick up the javelin thrown at him. Dead snake, you still dare to be so arrogant? Looking at the Cobra warrior who was about to chop him with a giant axe, Ragnar roared, and his spear pierced out quickly like a dragon, piercing through the plate armor on his body as easily as inserting tofu. Then, Ragnar pulled out a javelin stuck on his shield, aimed at another Cobra warrior hiding behind a tree stump and threw it. The sharp javelin easily penetrated the wooden stake and directly hit the Cobra warrior hiding behind it. After doing this, Ragnar left without looking back. He wanted to continue to hunt down those snake priestesses and avenge his legion. Even if he chased them all the way into the elves' occupied area, he would never stop. Half an hour later, Fine, kneel down, you humble and short-lived species. The personal soldier kicked Ragnar on the knee. Ragnar, who was hit hard, instantly softened his knees and could only kneel on one knee helplessly. Seeing Rohan in the room fiddling with the black iron spear that originally belonged to him, and the snake worship priestess who was kneeling obediently beside him, Ragnar couldn't help but curse angrily. Damn elves, you actually sheltered the believers of the snake worship. You will not have a good end. Calm down, little guy. It is obvious that you have not yet realized that you are a prisoner. Look at the beauty next to you. She is much more obedient than you. After pinching the priestess's pink little face, Rohan handed the black iron spear to the personal soldier next to him and asked the grey-haired Ragnar, "So, poor human brother, what made you break into the elf's territory in the middle of the night?" "The elf's territory? This belongs to the great Bacchus Empire, and you, damn pointy ears, are just a lucky guy who got lucky." Bah. Ragnar was angry about Rohan's shameless words and wanted to get up and spit in his face, but Rohan pulled the priestess over and blocked him in front of him. "Priestess?" Exclamation mark. "Just now, you treated me like a warm man, but now you are using me to block your saliva?" After throwing the dirty priestess aside, Rohan picked up a glass of milk, looked at Ragnar who was kneeling on the ground and staring at him with resentment, and said sarcastically, "You Bacchus Empire is really powerful. You have assembled an army of tens of thousands of people, but you are fighting fiercely with the snake cult and leaving us elves aside. Don't you look down on us too much? Humph. When the Empire's army wipes out the snake cult, the next step will be you. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the more you fight, the more time we have to prepare. Now, the Bacchus Empire, the snake cult and Durachi are all fighting fiercely, and reports of casualties are transmitted to Rohan almost every day. As the party with the least advantage in numbers, Rohan is naturally happy to see these humans fighting to the death, so that he can reap the benefits. Although he had recruited 10,000 human soldiers from Penda, he was not naive enough to think that these new recruits could compete with the veterans of the Bacchus Empire. Snake cult, now we need you to attract some firepower. Chapter 99, World Destroying Magic. Bacchus Empire, outside the city of Boshi. Simple tents are scattered all over the plains outside the city, and the pale green snake flags stretching for several kilometers are enough to scare any imperialist who sees this terrible army. The imperial defenders in the city looked at the snake worship army outside in despair. No one knew how the snake worship suddenly assembled an army of more than 100,000 people. Where did they come from? What are the supplies? But now is not the time to pay attention to these things. Although Emperor Marius has assembled the legion and continuously sent out night teams to sweep the snake worship temples entrenched in the mountains, but these rain-like attacks can't cause much damage to the snake worship with millions of believers. On the city wall, several generals wearing imperial lath armor are looking out of the city with sad faces. They are the lords of Boshi city and its vicinity. "Governor Justice, how long will it take for Emperor Marius's support to arrive?" a general asked the leading black-haired governor anxiously. As the most unlucky general among them, his fiefdom was Fadina, and his wife and daughter lived in Imperial Harbor. It was already miserable enough. He finally broke through the siege of the elf army in Imperial Harbor, but was besieged in Boshi city by the snake cult. This made him determined to die. "Calm down. This is just an invasion of the snake cult. Don't forget that we were generals who repelled the Legion of Terror. We must not lose a sense of proportion in this situation." Justice touched the silver cross on his chest obscurely, and when he looked at the anxious generals around him, he couldn't help but feel sad. Yes, they were once glorious, but after so many years, the bad nature of the nobles on the continent of Penda that made him sick seemed to have corrupted his colleagues. There are still nearly 10,000 city defense troops loyal to the empire in the city, and the glorious knights of the glorious cross are also stationed in the city. They still have the strength to fight. But his colleagues, in this situation, did not think about how to strengthen the city defense, but kept praying to old Marius who was far away. Thinking of this, Justice couldn't help looking at these cowardly generals, and suddenly felt annoyed, and then turned and left the city wall. He is one of the 3 governors of the Senate. As the backbone of the empire, he doesn't want to mix with these imperial insects anymore. Where are you going? Governor Justice. The army of the snake cult may attack the city at any time. Without even a siege tower, they can't take down the city wall. I'm going to have a good talk with the only wise person in the city about the next strategy. Wisdom? Who is it? Myself. The fog. The fog will dissipate one day. When Emperor Marius's legion comes to support, we will always have to go out of the city to respond. He has had enough of these good for nothings. What the city of knowledge needs now is a powerful force that can save them from the water and fire. Imperial Harbor. Countless green vines climb on the houses of citizens, and the blooming flowers emit a refreshing fragrance, making every citizen living in the city feel particularly happy. The stone statue that once symbolized the goddess of harvest, Damia, has long been demolished and replaced by an elf girl carved with white marble. In the hands of the elf girl, a smooth and elegant staff is being held high by her, and the sapphire on the top emits blue light day and night. Everyone who enters Imperial Harbor is shocked by the stone statue of the Lady of the Mist. Although only a month has passed, Imperial Harbor has become more prosperous under the leadership of Rohan, except that the number of citizens is slightly less. In order to make this city worthy of the glory of the Lady of the Mist, Rohan specially invited Isabel, who is still studying life magic, to decorate the city with plants full of vitality. In the renovated castle, Rohan was lying on the bed with Isabel in his arms, patiently listening to the information Isabel got. After talking to the plants, every 10 years or so, the Imperial port will be invaded by a snake cult army called the Legion of Terror, and Governor Karras will lead his soldiers to resist the invasion. Legion of Terror. What is that? Hearing the unfamiliar term appearing again, Rohan touched his forehead speechlessly. The place he occupied was really full of disasters. Rohan also knew something about the prophecy of Penda. It roughly tells the story of a player called the Son of Prophecy who traveled around and recreated the Penda Empire. When playing this Mountain Blade mod in his previous life, Rohan didn't know much about the background introduction in it, so he could only ask Isabel, who could communicate with plants, for help. Isabel was holding a booklet. During this period of time, she had been talking to plants and recorded all the useful information in this booklet. The Legion of Terror is an elite army of the ancient Qubax Empire. It was completely wiped out in the war with the snake cult more than 100 years ago, and was finally resurrected by the snake cult using secret methods, and became their minions. The current Legion leader is a mysterious female elf who calls herself Maltis. Some scholars in the ancient empire believe that she is a cinder elf resurrected by the snake cult, so evil. After reading out all the information in the booklet, Isabel put down the booklet with some disgust and complained to Rohan. Why are the routines of these evil gods and villains the same? Either resurrection or corruption? Because they are villains, their methods are definitely not as gentle as those of us gentlemen. Hearing Rohan's words, Isabel couldn't help rolling her eyes and continued to flip through her booklet. Ah, yes, you, a self-proclaimed gentleman, must have very fair and above-board methods on the battlefield, right? As a gentle elf like you, your people must not be the kind of Durachi who likes to capture slaves everywhere and also likes to open a silver pickpocket, right? No way, no way. Looking at Isabel who was sulking in his arms, Rohan immediately realized his slip of the tongue, so he quickly skipped the topic and asked, ahem, okay. It was my fault for lying to you at the beginning. Can you ask my intelligence chief to tell me about the Cinder elves? No, it seems that the Cinder were all wiped out a long time ago. I heard from the plants that the elves broke out in a civil war and finally used a magic to sink their own continent. Played himself to death. Rohan touched his chin. The magic that the Witch King tried to use to destroy the Great Whirlpool was bounced back and only destroyed the Nagarythe area. If he could learn this kind of magic, even if he couldn't destroy a continent, it would be great. If he could directly subvert the entire battlefield like those lizardmen slan priests. As far as Rohan knew, there was once a giant black ark that looted the temple city of the lizardmen and stole a stone tablet of the ancient saint. At that time, one of the slan was very angry. He used magic to pull the black ark, which had already left the coast, back and summoned the big white lizard, Garlock, on the other side of the continent. The tens of thousands of Durachi warriors on the black ark were soon smashed by the swarming lizardmen and then slaughtered. Whenever he thought of this, Rohan felt a chill in his heart. After all, although he would not take the initiative to provoke the lizardmen, as a time traveler, what if he aroused the interest of Mastermar? No. I want to talk to Lysadillan to see if these Noldor elves brought any magic scrolls or other treasures when they came to this continent. Chapter 100, The Magic of the Noldor. On the training ground outside the palace, many Durachi warriors were gathered outside the field, whispering to each other, and no one knew what they were talking about. Rohan's personal soldiers, the Silver Mist Hunters, were constantly wandering around the shooting range, constantly greeting the passing soldiers. Hey, brother, are you interested in participating in a bet? The alien elf named Lysadillan wants to challenge Captain Ang, and is now preparing to compete with the captain. Really? Captain Ang is a warrior blessed by the lady. How dare that foreign elf? Yes. And he actually wants Captain Ang to give up the position of captain of the personal soldiers to him, which is simply audacious. In the shooting range, Ang, who was originally checking his weapons, heard the boasting of his teammates outside, and his mouth corners slightly raised, looking at Lysadillan next to him with a trace of disdain. A mere mercenary without faith and honor actually wanted to get close to Lord Rohan, which is simply wishful thinking. As for those Durachi warriors, who didn't know what was going on, when they heard the status dispute between the two, they took out gold coins, and shouted to the guards who opened the betting, I bet on Captain Angle. Me too. Why do you all dislike the newcomer? Maybe Captain Angle will win gloriously. I bet on Captain Angle too. Almost all the veterans of Durachi bet on Angle. Only those who had just joined the Rohan army were fooled by the veterans and bet their salaries on Lysadillan. After all, Angle was a vicious warrior living in the iceberg of Nagarythe. After receiving the blessing of the lady, even some dreadlords were no match for him. As for the newly joined Lysadillan, in the eyes of the veterans, he was just a little jerk with no loyalty. In the shooting range, Lysadillan silently wiped his compound bow. He knew that he was a newcomer, and he had to prove his strength if he wanted to fully integrate into the group. After a month of getting along, Lysadillan has realized that, if he wants to gain a foothold in the Dark Elf army, he must prove his worth. That's why he wants to challenge Ange, just to prove himself, the strength of an older gladiator champion. Outside the shooting range, the personal soldier in charge of opening the gambling table was happily looking at the hundreds of gold coins on the table. The commission from this was enough for him to make a fortune, so he lowered his head and counted the money while shouting, is there anyone who wants to participate in the gambling? Bet on it. Don't you know that opening gambling tables is strictly prohibited in the military camp? I bet 100 gold coins on Lysadillan to win. A large money bag fell directly on the table, knocking down the mountain of gold coins that the personal soldier had finally piled up, and the gold coins instantly scattered all over the ground. Looking at the gold coins on the ground, the guard raised his head angrily and prepared to scold, but after seeing the person clearly, he immediately stood up in fear and said, Sir, if you confiscate these gold coins, those who participated in the gambling will kill me. The person who came was Rohan. Since all the guards who came out to find Lysadillan before were nowhere to be seen, Rohan sneaked out quietly and happened to meet the gambling people. Because Rohan had established strict military regulations that prohibited soldiers from gambling while marching and fighting, the gambling games on weekdays were reported to Dario in advance. But now Dario was outside training new soldiers and going directly to Rohan. They didn't dare to disturb Rohan, who was chatting with Isabel. Seeing the well-behaved guard, Rohan stepped forward to help him collect the gold coins, and then looked at Ange and Lysadillan, who had already entered the shooting range, and comforted him. Don't worry, it's okay to do some small activities. to relax during the garrison. What are they going to compete in? Are there any rules? Oh, yes, sir. They are going to compete in target shooting, and then a wooden sword duel. Seeing that Rohan didn't seem to care about his gambling, the guard immediately reacted, quietly collecting the scattered gold coins on the ground, while introducing the rules of the game to Rohan. In the venue, several slaves were carrying several bird cages to the shooting range, which contained dozens of sparrows, chirping and jumping up and down. These were purchased from the children who caught birds on the street. After some careful care, they became the favorite targets of the sharpshooters of Pend. But even the strongest human archer in Pend could only shoot these flexible little guys within 50 meters. Even the best of the Durachi warriors who came to try could only barely complete the best score of 80 meters. Only a mist walker like Ange, or an older elf who specializes in archery like Lysadilon, dares to shoot from a distance of 100 meters. Outside the venue, Lysadilon looked at the Asuryu bow in Ange's hand, and then looked at the enchanted crossbow placed aside, and couldn't help asking, why don't you use your crossbow? I'm quite curious about its power. Are you serious? This is a crossbow blessed by the Lady of the Mist. The crossbow arrows fired from it have the ability to track. You don't want to compete with him. After hearing Lysadilon's somewhat naive words, Ange mocked him, then pulled out an arrow from the quiver and strung it, and shouted to the slaves in the distance, "Hey, get ready." After hearing Ange's shout, the slaves hurriedly opened the bird cages on their fingers, and then hid outside the shooting range in fear. Chirp, chirp. The sparrows looked at the open bird cage, spread their wings, and flew towards the horizon, thinking they could be free, but they didn't know that this was just the exit to death. Ange took the lead. The yew wood produced in the Avalon area is the best material for making bows. The bowstring weighing hundreds of pounds is like a toy in Ange's hands. Bang! After aiming at the two sparrows that were flying and playing, Ange released the bowstring, and the bow arm instantly straightened, driving the arrow to fly far away. The two sparrows who were celebrating their freedom were hit by the sudden arrows before they could react, and then fell to the ground. The slaves who were hiding on the side hurried forward, looked at the arrows that pierced the two sparrows on the ground, and couldn't help swallowing their saliva. Then they spent a lot of effort to pull out the arrows that were deeply embedded in the soil. Looking at the arrows sent by the slaves, the onlookers, Druki, applauded and cheered, and Ange gradually lost himself in the voices of captain around him. After throwing the yew long bow in his hand to his followers, Ange looked at Lysadilon, who was fiddling with the composite bow, and proudly advised, "Young elf, I advise you to give up as soon as possible. This body blessed by the lady is simply not comparable to your mortal body. Indeed, my body is indeed not as strong as yours, but even so, we Noldo have the capital to be proud of." Lysadilon slowly pulled the bowstring, and Ange noticed that a red emerald gem was embedded on the other's bow handle at some point. Rohan outside the venue narrowed his eyes slightly. He could feel that this gem was emitting a very unfamiliar energy fluctuation, which he had never seen before. Is it a magical item inherited from the Cinder? Looking at the red emerald that was as hot as a flame, Rohan suppressed his excitement and hid in the crowd, silently watching Lysadilon pretending to be cool in front of everyone. The light red stream of light slowly attached to the arrow. Lysadilon glanced at the surprised Ange, smiled and said, "Let me show you the real magic of the elves." Bang! The crisp sound of the bowstring came, and the arrow wrapped in the stream of light crossed the entire training ground like a red comet, and then scattered like fireworks in the air. P.S. My uncle came to visit in the morning, and the bed collapsed at night. It was really a house leaking, and it rained all night. Cack. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.